In the ashes of Ruusan, where 1,000 Jedi and Sith lie entombed in silence, a child stands alone. Her hands still tremble with the power that killed 2 Jedi Knights. Her cousin's blood stains the mud beneath her feet, and in the shadows, a figure approaches. A survivor, the last of the Sith. He will call her Zannah, and she will become legend. But this is not a story of triumph. This is a story of patience, of a decade spent in shadow, learning to kill with whispers and illusions, of a master who refuses to die, his body consumed by parasites, his mind obsessed with immortality, of an apprentice who must choose between loyalty and destiny. On a forgotten world, they will face each other at last. Master against apprentice, raw power against perfected technique. And when the lightsabers ignite and the Sith sorcery begins, only one will walk away. But here is the question that haunts the dark side itself. When the battle ends and the victor stands alone, whose eyes will stare back from the mirror? The apprentice who won, or the master who found another way to survive? Before the Empire, before Vader, before Sidious claimed the galaxy, this is where the rule of 2 was tested in blood and proved in death. This is the entire story of Darth Zannah. Tonight we journey into the shadows of the old Republic, where the Sith were thought extinct but secretly grew stronger through patience and cunning. From a war orphan's tragedy to the deadliest apprentice the galaxy had ever seen. This is a tale of transformation, power, and the ultimate test of the rule of 2. Now, here's something interesting. About 71% of you watching right now haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying these deep dives into Star Wars legends, hitting that subscribe button genuinely helps this channel grow and lets me bring you more stories like this. And I'm genuinely curious. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there right now. I love seeing our community span across different time zones, from late-night listeners in America to early morning fans in Asia. So go ahead, hit like if you're ready for this journey. Get comfortable, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle background noise. Pull up your blanket, settle in, and let's begin the saga of Rain, who became Zannah, who became a Dark Lord of the Sith. 1,000 years before the rise of the Empire, the galaxy burned. This was the age of the new Sith Wars, a conflict so vast and so endless that entire generations knew nothing but danger. On the outer rim world of Ruusan, 2 armies prepared for their final confrontation. Lord Hoth's Army of Light. 10,000 Jedi warriors, their lightsabers blazing like stars against the darkness. And the Brotherhood of Darkness, an army of Sith, united under a single terrible purpose. Between these titans, caught in the grinding machinery of galactic war, were the forgotten ones, the refugees, the survivors who had nothing to do with the Force or destiny or ancient prophecies. They simply wanted to live. Among them was a girl of 10 years. They called her Rain. She had brown hair matted with dust, and eyes that had seen too much for her age. Her parents were gone, lost to the war's endless hunger. She lived in a makeshift camp on Ruusan's outskirts with other refugee children, scrounging for food among the bombed-out ruins, hiding when the armies clashed, emerging when the silence returned to search for anything edible, anything useful, anything that might help them survive another day. Rain had 2 cousins. Lai, her older cousin, barely 14, but already hardened by survival. And Daravit, younger, still clinging to hope that somehow this war would end and they would find safety. There was also Bug, a friend from the camps, small and quick, and always smiling despite everything. They looked after each other. That was all they had. The camp itself was a collection of torn shelters and fading hopes, clustered in a valley between 2 ridges. At night, you could see the glow of lightsabers on the horizon, flashing like lightning, red and blue and green, painting the sky with violence. During the day, smoke rose from the battlefields, thick and black, blotting out Ruusan's sun. The children learned to read the signs. When the fighting moved closer, they hid in the caves. When it moved away, they scavenged. They ate whatever they could find: roots, insects, rations left behind by dead soldiers. Rain never complained. She accepted this life because it was the only life she knew. War was normal. Death was normal. Tomorrow was never guaranteed. But she had Loth. She had Daravit. She had Bug. And in this nightmare, that was enough. On the horizon, dark clouds gathered. The 7th Battle of Ruusan was about to begin. And in the shadows of that gathering storm, a scarred figure watched the refugee camp with calculating eyes. He wore armor that seemed alive, writhing across his skin. His name was Bane, and he was waiting. The forest beyond the refugee camp was a graveyard of broken trees and scorched earth. This was where Lan took rein that morning, searching for anything the armies might have left behind. Food, supplies, maybe a functioning power cell they could trade. Daravit stayed at camp with Bug. Too dangerous for all of them to go, Laurie had said. Better to split up, cover more ground, return before dark. Rain followed her cousin through the devastation, stepping over blast craters and twisted metal. The air smelled like burning, and something else, something sweet and wrong that Rain had learned, meant bodies were nearby. They avoided those areas. Nothing useful came from getting too close to the dead. They found a collapsed supply depot near the western ridge. Imperial rations, Latha called them, though Rain didn't know what empire she meant. The containers were half buried but intact. They dug them out with their hands, their fingers bleeding by the time they pried the seals open. Inside were protein bars, dried fruit, water purification tablets. A fortune. Lata smiled for the first time in weeks. They loaded everything into a torn satchel, already planning how to divide it among the camp. The younger children would eat first, then the elderly, then everyone else. That was how they survived. Together. They were heading back when they heard voices. 2 men emerged from the tree line ahead. They wore robes, brown and weathered. Lightsabers hung from their belts. Jedi? Rain recognized them from the camps. Though she'd never spoken to one, they were supposed to be the good ones, the protectors, the heroes of the Republic. But these 2 didn't look heroic. They looked exhausted, paranoid. Their eyes darted constantly, hands hovering near their weapons. Chethra raised her hands slowly. "We're just refugees," she said. "Just children. We're going back to camp." One of the Jedi stepped forward. His face was gaunt, his cheeks hollow. "Where's your camp?" he demanded. "Who else is with you?" "Just us," Lysiani answered. "Please, we don't want any trouble." The second Jedi circled around them, his hand now gripping his lightsaber hilt. "You're lying," he said. His voice shook. "You're scouts. Sith scouts. Sith scouts. They use children now. They use anyone." Rain felt her heart hammering. She pressed closer to La, clutching the satchel of food against her chest. "We're not Sith," La said. La said. La said. La said. La said. La said. "We're refugees. Look at us. We're just trying to survive." The first Jedi's hand moved to his lightsaber. "That's what they all say," he muttered, right before they signaled the ambush. And then everything happened too fast. The lightsaber ignited. Blue light, pure and bright, the color Rain had always associated with safety, with justice. Leia screamed. The blade went through her chest in one clean thrust. She gasped, her eyes going wide, her hands reaching for the wound that couldn't be fixed. She fell. The satchel dropped. Protein bars spilled across the mud. Rain couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't understand what she was seeing. Laia's blood pooled dark against the soil. The Jedi pulled his blade free, already turning toward Rain. His companion moved to flank her. "We have to be sure," one of them said. "We can't take chances." Something inside Rain shattered. Not her fear, not her hope, something deeper, something she didn't have words for. Her hands came up without thought. Energy surged through her body, wild and burning and angry. It felt like lightning. It felt like hatred made manifest. Purple-white electricity erupted from her fingers. The Jedi tried to raise their lightsabers in defense, but the lightning found them anyway. It crawled across their bodies, seeping through their robes, cooking them from the inside. They screamed, they convulsed, they fell, and Rain kept pouring the lightning into them until they stopped moving, until they stopped breathing, until the murderers of her cousin were nothing but smoking corpses in the mud. The power faded. Rain collapsed to her knees beside Leia's body. Her cousin's eyes stared at nothing. Rain wanted to cry, but nothing came. The tears wouldn't fall. There was only emptiness now, only the echo of that power still tingling in her fingertips. She didn't know how long she knelt there. Minutes, hours, time lost, meaning. Then the sky began to scream. A sound like reality tearing, a pressure in the air that made Rain's ears pop and her teeth ache. She looked up and saw it on the horizon where the armies clashed. A sphere of pure energy was forming, growing, expanding. Lord Hoth's final gambit, his thought bomb, a weapon that would kill every Force-sensitive being on Ruusan, Jedi and Sith alike. A weapon that would end the war by annihilating everyone who wielded the Force. The sphere touched the ground. The world turned white. Rain threw herself flat, covering her head with her arms. The shockwave rolled over her like a physical thing, hot and suffocating. She felt it pass through her, searching, probing, looking for the Force inside her. But she was too young, too weak, too newly awakened. It passed over her and moved on. When the light faded, silence blanketed Ruusan. Rain stood on shaking legs. The forest around her was gone. Just ash and stumps remained. In the distance nothing moved. No lightsabers flashed. No armies marched. 10,000 Force users, Jedi and Sith, dead in an instant. She was alone. Lycie's body lay at her feet, untouched by the blast. Rain stared at it, at her, at the cousin who had protected her, fed her, kept her alive through years of war. Murdered by Jedi, avenged by power, Rain didn't understand. Footsteps crunched through the ash behind her. Rain spun, hands coming up, ready to unleash that lightning again. But the figure that emerged from the smoke made her freeze. He was tall, heavily muscled. His body was covered in some kind of living armor, dark shells that pulsed and writhed across his skin. His face was hard, his eyes calculating. A lightsaber hung at his side. Sith, Rain thought, but he didn't attack. He just stood there studying her, taking in the dead Jedi. The scorch marks in the dirt, Lars' body. Then his gaze settled on Rain, and something like recognition flickered in his expression. "You killed them," he said. Not a question, a statement. Rain said nothing. She had no words left. The man stepped closer, moving with the careful grace of a predator. The living armor on his body shifted and clicked. "What's your name, child?" "Rain," she whispered. He nodded, slowly. Then he knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. His face was scarred, ancient. "The lightning you used, you've never been trained." Rain shook her head. "But you felt it, the power, the anger." She nodded. The man smiled. It was not a kind smile. "I am Bane," he said. "The last of the Sith, and you, Rain, are exactly what I've been searching for." He stood, offering his hand. "The Jedi killed your family, betrayed everything they claim to stand for. They are not your protectors, they are your enemies." Rain stared at his hand, at Lia's body, at the ashes of a galaxy that had never cared whether she lived or died. She took his hand. "From this moment," Bane said, "you are no longer Rain, you are Zannah, my apprentice, and together we will ensure the Sith never fall again." Zannah. The name felt right. It felt like power, like purpose, like revenge. She squeezed his hand and nodded. Behind them Ruusan smoldered in silence. Ahead, a new path opened. One lit not by the blue glow of Jedi sabers, but by the red fire of the dark side. The rule of two had found its first true apprentice, and the galaxy would never be the same. The ship that carried them from Ruusan was old and cramped. Zannah had never been off-world before. She pressed her face against the viewport, watching her home planet shrink into a gray dot against the black. Everything she'd known was down there. Lazar's body, Bog, probably dead in the camps. Daravit, lost somewhere in the chaos. All of it gone now. Bane sat in the pilot's chair, silent and focused. The living armor covering his body moved constantly, shells sliding over shells, making soft clicking sounds that filled the cabin. Zannah had tried not to stare at it during the journey, but curiosity eventually won. "What is that?" she asked quietly, pointing at his chest where the shells were thickest. Bane glanced down. "Obelisks," he said. "Parasites from the Sith world of Dingsen. They bonded to me years ago. Are they hurting you?" His jaw tightened. "Every moment. They feed on the dark side, on the anger and hate that fuels my power. In exchange, they make me nearly invulnerable. No blade can pierce them. No energy weapon can burn through. Then why do you look like you're in pain?" "Because I am." Bane's voice was matter of fact. "The dark side is not meant to be comfortable, Zannah. It is meant to make you strong." She didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway. She was good at that. Nodding, staying quiet, watching, learning. Their destination was Ambria, a desert world in the Stennis node. Bane explained it during the approach. Once Ambria had been lush and green. Then a Jedi named Thon fought a great battle there against dark side creatures. The confrontation poisoned the planet, turning it into a wasteland, but pockets of life remained, and in one of those pockets lived someone Bane needed. A healer named Caleb. They landed near a cluster of rocky outcroppings where sparse vegetation clung to existence. A small dwelling sat nestled against the largest rock face, its walls made from salvaged metal and stone. Smoke rose from a chimney. Caleb emerged before they even reached the door. He was thin, almost skeletal, with long gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. When he saw Bane, he stopped walking. His face went pale. "No," Caleb said. "Not again. I told you last time. I'm done." "You're never done," Bane replied calmly. "Not while you still draw breath." Caleb's gaze shifted to Zannah. His expression softened slightly. "A child. You brought a child." "I brought my apprentice." The healer closed his eyes. "Force, help us all." Inside the dwelling, the air was cool and smelled like herbs. Shelves lined the walls, crowded with jars and vials and medical instruments. Caleb gestured for them to sit at a worn table. Bane lowered himself carefully, the obelisks making it difficult to bend normally. Zannah perched on a stool, her legs dangling. "Why are you here?" Caleb asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "The obelisks are spreading," Bane said. "They've reached my shoulders and neck. Soon they'll cover my face, my brain. When that happens, I'll lose control. I need you to monitor the progression, slow it if possible. I can't remove them. You know that. I'm not asking you to remove them. Just keep me alive long enough to complete my work. Caleb's eyes flicked to Zannah again. And her, what's her part in this work? She will carry on the Sith legacy when I'm gone. She will be stronger than me, smarter, more patient. The rule of two demands it. The rule of two. Caleb shook his head. You really believe that destroying the Brotherhood and leaving only yourself was the answer? The Brotherhood was weak. Too many Sith fighting for scraps of power, betraying each other, forgetting the true goal. The Dane leaned forward, his voice hard. One master to embody the power, one apprentice to crave it. When the apprentice grows strong enough, she kills the master and takes an apprentice of her own, each generation stronger than the last. That is how the Sith will survive. That is how we will eventually rule the galaxy. Zannah listened to every word. She didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. She absorbed it all like dry earth absorbing rain. Caleb sighed. Fine, I'll monitor your condition, but the girl stays away from my medical supplies. I won't have a child experimenting with toxins and dark side alchemy. She's not here to play with your supplies, Bane said. She's here to train. And so the training began. Every morning before the twin suns rose, Bane woke Zannah. They would walk into the desert, far from Caleb's dwelling, to a place where the dark side lingered thick in the air. The site of Thurn's ancient battle, the ground there was cracked and black. Nothing grew, and the force felt heavy, oppressive, like a weight pressing down on the mind. This is where you will learn, Bane told her, on that first morning. The dark side is strongest in places of death and suffering. Here you will open yourself to it, let it flow through you, shape it, control it. How? Zannah asked. By feeling, by wanting. The Force responds to emotion, to passion, to anger, and hate, and fear. The Jedi teach their students to suppress these things, to find peace and serenity. But peace is a lie. Peace makes you weak. It is through passion that you find strength. He extended his hand. A small rock lifted from the ground, floating in the air between them. This is telekinesis. Simple. Every Force user can do it. Now you try. Zannah focused on another rock. She reached out with her mind, remembering the feeling of the lightning on Ruusan, that wild, burning energy. She tried to channel it, to direct it. The rock wobbled, shifted slightly, then fell back to the ground. Again, Bane said. She tried again, and again, and again, for hours, until her head throbbed and sweat soaked through her clothes. By midday she could lift the rock consistently. By evening she could hold it steady. Good, Bane said. Tomorrow we continue. The days blurred together. Weeks became months. Zannah learned to move objects, to push and pull with the Force, to sense living things around her. Bane taught her about the history of the Sith, about Darth Revan and Darth Malak, about Freeden Nad and Exar Kun, about the endless cycle of Sith rising and falling, always defeated by their own infighting. That ends with us. Bane would say, we are patient, we are careful, we do not reveal ourselves until the time is right. But Zannah's true talent emerged in a different area. One afternoon, Bane brought her to face a wild sand panther that prowled the wastes near Caleb's home. The creature was starving, desperate, dangerous. It snarled when it saw them, muscles tensing to attack. Kill it, Bane commanded. Zannah had no weapon, no lightsaber yet, only the Force. She reached out, not with telekinesis, but with her mind. She pushed into the panther's thoughts, into its primitive consciousness. And there, she planted an image, a vision. She showed the panther flames erupting from the ground, consuming everything, burning it alive. The panther froze. Its eyes went wide. It began to back away, whimpering, seeing fire that wasn't there. Then it turned and fled into the desert. Bane stared at her. "What did you do?" "I made it see fire." "You created an illusion in its mind." He stepped closer, studying her face. "That is Sith sorcery, advanced technique. I haven't even taught you the basics yet. Zannah hesitated. "I felt what it was afraid of, and I showed it that fear." Bane's expression shifted. Something like satisfaction crossed his features. "This is your strength," he said. "Not raw power, not brute force, but the ability to manipulate minds, to twist perception, to turn an enemy's thoughts against them. This is what will make you dangerous." From that day forward, her training shifted focus. Bane taught her the ancient techniques of Sith sorcery, how to project illusions into multiple minds at once, how to make people see things that weren't there, hear voices that didn't exist, feel pain that had no physical source, how to drive someone mad without ever touching them. It was slow work, difficult, but Zannah had patience and she had motivation. Every time she practiced, she thought of Lessia, of the Jedi who murdered her, of the power she would need to ensure no one ever hurt her like that again. Months turned into years. Zannah grew taller, stronger. Her control over the Force deepened. Bane also taught her lightsaber combat, focusing on Form 3, sorcery, the defensive form. He explained that her body would never match his strength, so she needed to rely on technique, on patience, on wearing down opponents until they made mistakes. She trained with a practice saber at first, learning the positions, the footwork, the philosophy of defense. Wait for the opening, never overextend, let the enemy exhaust themselves. When she turned 16, Bane finally allowed her to construct her own lightsaber. She built it in Caleb's workshop, using crystals Bane had acquired and components she'd scavenged from old weapons. But her design was unique. A curved hilt for better control and 2 blades, one on each end. A double-bladed lightsaber. Bane examined it when she finished. "Unusual," he said, "difficult to master." "I'll master it," Zannah replied. And she did. By her 20th year, Zannah had become everything Bane hoped for: a skilled duelist, a master of illusions, a patient strategist who thought in decades rather than days. She studied ancient Sith holocrons Bane had collected, learning from the recorded wisdom of Freedon Nad and Darth Bane's own philosophical recordings. But Caleb grew more disturbed with each passing year. One evening, Zannah found him sitting outside his dwelling, staring at the sunset. She sat beside him without speaking. "You were just a child," Caleb said quietly. "When he brought you here, I thought maybe I could help you, steer you away from this path." "You couldn't have," Zannah said. "This is who I am." "No, this is who he made you." She shook her head. "The Jedi made me this. They killed lie. They showed me that their light is just another kind of darkness. At least the Sith are honest about what we are." Caleb looked at her with sad eyes. "I hope you find peace someday, child, before it's too late." But Zannah knew there would be no peace. Not for her, not ever. Peace was a lie. There was only passion, only power, only the dark side. And one day when she was ready, there would be only her. 10 years. A decade can feel like eternity when you're young, when every day is training and meditation and the slow, careful accumulation of knowledge. Zannah marked her 20th birthday alone in the desert, watching Ambria's twin suns set beyond the cracked horizon. She didn't celebrate. Celebration implied joy, and joy was not something the Sith cultivated. But satisfaction, that was different. She ignited her double-bladed lightsaber, the crimson blades humming in the growing darkness. She moved through the forms Bane had drilled into her, each motion precise, economical, perfect. Form 3 was not flashy. It didn't look impressive, but it was unbreakable when executed properly. A wall of defense that gave nothing, conceded nothing, until the opponent tired and made the fatal error. Zannah had fought Bane in practice duels hundreds of times now. She'd never won, but she was lasting longer each time, forcing him to work harder, making him sweat. Soon, she thought, not yet, but soon, she deactivated her weapon and returned to Caleb's dwelling. The healer was long dead now. 5 years in the ground, he died quietly in his sleep one night, exhausted by age and the weight of harboring Sith lords in his home. Bane had buried him without ceremony. Zannah had felt nothing. Caleb had been kind to her, in his way, but kindness was just another weakness. The dwelling belonged to them now. Bane had converted most of it into a library, filling the shelves with datapads and holocrons and ancient texts salvaged from forgotten Sith worlds. Zannah spent her evenings there, reading by candlelight, absorbing everything she could about the history of the dark side. She learned about Freedan Nad, the fallen Jedi who became a Sith and ruled Onderon for a century through manipulation and fear. His holocron sat on the shelf above her bed, its gatekeeper occasionally offering cryptic wisdom about the nature of power. She studied Darth Bane's own writings, the philosophical framework for the rule of two. His logic was sound. The old Sith Empire had collapsed because too many Darksiders fought each other for dominance. Assassinations, betrayals, civil wars that weakened them until the Jedi could strike. But two Sith, working in perfect shadow, could grow strong without infighting, could infiltrate the Republic, could wait generations for the perfect moment to strike. Patience was the key. Patience and secrecy. The Republic believed the Sith extinct. The Jedi celebrated their victory at Ruusan, erecting monuments to the fallen, declaring a new age of peace. They had no idea that the Sith endured, that they were being slowly, carefully undermined from within. Bane handled most of the political manipulation himself. He would disappear for weeks at a time, traveling to Coruscant or other core worlds under false identities. He owned shell corporations, influenced senators through bribed aides, planted seeds of corruption that would bear fruit decades later. But sometimes he sent Zannah. Her first solo mission came when she was 18, a minor noble on Sereno, a man who'd been blocking legislation that would benefit Bane's long-term plans. The target had to die, but it had to look natural. No violence, no evidence. Zannah spent a week studying him, his routines, his fears, his weaknesses. Then one night, she entered his estate through the servants' entrance, using the Force to cloud the guards' perceptions. They looked right at her and saw nothing, just empty corridor, just shadows. She found him in his study, alone, reviewing financial reports, and she showed him his nightmares. The illusions crashed over him like a wave. Suddenly he wasn't in his study anymore. He was drowning. Water filled his lungs. His children were screaming his name from the shore, but he couldn't reach them. Something pulled him down into the black depths, something with teeth. His heart gave out in minutes. When the servants found him the next morning, slumped over his desk, the medics ruled it a cardiac event. Stress, too much rich food. These things happened. No one suspected murder. Zannah returned to Ambria and reported success. Bane examined her carefully, searching for hesitation or guilt. He found neither. Good, he said. You understand now. Power is not always about the lightsaber. Often, it's about knowing which buttons to push, which fears to exploit. She understood perfectly. Over the next 2 years, she carried out 7 more missions, each one different, each one successful. She assassinated a corrupt governor who was interfering with Bane's shell companies. She manipulated a Jedi investigator into abandoning his inquiry through carefully constructed illusions that made him question his own sanity. She infiltrated a merchant guild and planted evidence that led to a war between two rival factions, clearing the way for Bane to seize control of their trade routes. She became a ghost, a whisper, a nightmare that people didn't know they should fear. But while Zannah grew stronger, Bane grew weaker. The obelisks were spreading. They covered his entire torso now, creeping up his neck, approaching his jawline. The pain he endured was constant, visible in the tightness around his eyes, the way he moved with controlled rigidity. One evening Zannah found him in the library, surrounded by medical texts and Sith treatises on healing. He was researching something, his focus absolute. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "A cure," Bane said, without looking up, or at least a way to slow the progression. "Can't you just remove them?" "No, they've bonded too deeply. Ripping them off would kill me, and even if I survived, I'd lose the protection they provide." His jaw clenched. "I'm searching for another solution." Zannah moved closer, reading over his shoulder. The datapad displayed information about ancient Sith techniques, body modification, alchemical treatments, and something else. Something that made her blood chill. Essence transfer. The ability to move your consciousness from one body to another. "Is that real?" she asked carefully. Bane closed the datapad. There are references to it in several sources. Darth Bane supposedly mastered the technique. He called himself the Immortal for that reason. Where is he now? Dead, truly dead. But his holocron might still exist. Bane's eyes met hers. "If I could find it, I could learn the technique. I could abandon this failing body and continue my work." Zannah's mind raced. The rule of two demanded that the apprentice eventually kill the master. That was the test. The proof of worthiness. That if Bane could transfer his essence into a new body, he could potentially live forever. The rule of two would become meaningless. She kept her expression neutral. Where would you even begin looking? Prakith, an old Sith world in the deep core, and Dee maintained a fortress there. If the holocron survived, that's where it would be. Bane stood, wincing as the obelisks shifted with his movement. "But first, I need more information. There's a man on Nal Hutta, a collector of Sith artifacts. His name is Hetton. He might know more about Andy's whereabouts." "When do we leave?" Zannah asked. But Bane studied her face. "You're eager." "I want to see the galaxy. I've spent 10 years on this desert rock." He nodded slowly. "Tomorrow then, gather what you need." That night, Zannah lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling. The implications churned through her mind. If Bane truly sought immortality, if he planned to break the rule of two and rule forever, then she would eventually have to act. She would have to challenge him before he succeeded. But not yet. She wasn't ready. Bane was still too strong, too skilled, too experienced. She needed more time, more training, more knowledge. And perhaps she needed to learn about essence transfer herself, to know how to defend against it when the time came. She rose before dawn and packed a small bag, her lightsaber, a few changes of clothes, a datapad with copies of the most important Sith texts. Bane was already at the ship when she arrived, running pre-flight checks. He glanced at her bag and nodded approval. "You travel light. Good. We'll be moving quickly." They lifted off from Ambria. As the suns rose, the desert planet falling away beneath them. Zannah watched it shrink, this place that had been her home for a decade. She felt no nostalgia, no attachment. Home was a weakness. Home was a chain. She was Sith. She belonged nowhere and everywhere. The ship jumped to hyperspace, and Ambria disappeared into memory. Ahead lay Nal Hutta, a criminal's paradise in Huttese space, a swamp world ruled by gangsters and slavers, where the weak were devoured and the strong prospered. Zannah smiled. She would fit right in. Nal Hutta smelled like rot and money. The ship descended through layers of thick, humid atmosphere, breaking through clouds that clung like oil. Below, the surface sprawled in shades of brown and green, endless swamps punctuated by towering industrial complexes and palatial estates. This was Hutt space, where the law was whatever the slug lords decided it was, where slavery flourished openly, and where credits talked louder than any Republic charter. Bane piloted them toward the coordinates he'd obtained through his network of informants. Hetton's compound sat on a private island in the Ivakar swamps, accessible only by air or boat, defensible, isolated. Exactly what you'd expect from a man collecting illegal Sith artifacts. They landed on a platform, extending from the main building, a sprawling structure built in layers, each level more fortified than the last. Guards flanked the landing pad, human mercenaries armed with blaster rifles and vibroblades. They watched Bane and Zannah disembark with professional wariness. One stepped forward. "State your business." "We're here to see Hetton," Bane said. "He's expecting us." The guard spoke into a comm unit, listened to a response, then gestured toward the entrance. "He says, you can come up, weapons stay with you, but any trouble and you'll be dead before you hit the ground." "Understood," Bane replied. They walked through security checkpoints, past more guards, through corridors lined with expensive art and strange artifacts. Zannah recognized some from her studies: a Sith sword from the old Empire, a meditation sphere used by ancient Darksiders, a fragment of a star map leading to forgotten tomb worlds. Hetton was wealthy, very wealthy. They found him on the top floor, in a circular chamber with windows overlooking the swamp. He sat behind a massive desk carved from what looked like a single piece of black stone. The man himself was in his 50s, well-fed, dressed in expensive robes. His hair was going gray, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, and familiar. Zannah felt it immediately, the Force signature. This man had been trained as a Jedi once, but something had happened. Something had turned him away from that path. "Darth Bane," Hetton said, rising from his seat. His voice carried false warmth. "I've heard rumors about you for years. The last Sith, the destroyer of the Brotherhood of Darkness. An honor to finally meet you." "You've done your research," Bane replied. His hand rested casually near his lightsaber. "I make it my business to know who operates in the shadows." Hetton's gaze shifted to Zannah. "And who's this? Your apprentice?" Zannah said nothing. She'd learned from Bane that silence often revealed more than words. "Yes," Bane confirmed. "Now let's dispense with pleasantries. You collect Sith artifacts. I need information about Darth Andia's holocron." Hetton's smile widened, straight to business. "I appreciate that. Yes, I know of Anda's holocron. In fact, I know exactly where it is." "Where?" "Prakith, deep core, in Andy's original fortress sealed in his tomb." Hetton walked to one of the windows, but accessing it is another matter. The fortress is trapped, guarded by Sith alchemy creatures that have survived for millennia, and the deep core navigation alone is treacherous. "I can handle the navigation," Bane said, "and the traps." "I'm sure you can." Hetton turned back to face them. "But information like this doesn't come free. I want something in return. Name your price." "Train me." Hetton's expression hardened. "I was a Jedi once, expelled from the Order for delving too deeply into forbidden knowledge. I've taught myself what I could from the artifacts I've collected, but I lack true mastery. Teach me the ways of the Sith, and the information about Prekith is yours. Bane considered this. How long were you with the Jedi? 15 years. I was a knight, not a master, but skilled enough. And why should I train you when I could simply kill you and take the information? Because I've taken precautions. Hetton gestured, and panels in the walls slid open. Armed men emerged, at least a dozen, weapons trained on Bane and Zannah. If I die, they have orders to destroy all my research. You'll never find Prekith without my navigational data. The obelisks on Bane's body rippled, responding to his surge of anger. Zannah felt the dark side thicken in the room like smoke. The guards shifted nervously, sensing something wrong even if they couldn't identify it. "Stand down," Bane said quietly. His hand moved away from his lightsaber. "Very well, I'll train you. But understand this. The Sith way is not gentle. If you prove weak, you'll die in training. I accept those terms. Then we have a deal. Show me your navigational data, and we'll begin your instruction." Hetton moved to his desk, activating a hollow projector. A star map appeared, showing the deep core's treacherous gravity wells and stellar phenomena. A single red dot marked Prekith's location, buried deep within overlapping hazard zones. "This data cost me a fortune," Hetton said. "Ancient charts from before the Ruusan Reformation. Most modern navigators don't even know these routes exist." Bane studied the map. "Good. We'll leave for Prekith within the week. You'll come with us." Mil Hetton looked surprised. "I thought you'd take the data and go. If you want training, you train in the field." Bane's smile was cold. "The best lessons are learned when death is the consequence of failure." Over the next 3 days, Bane put Hetton through his paces. He tested the man's knowledge of the Force, his lightsaber skills, his mental discipline. Hetton was competent, more skilled than most dark side dabblers, but he lacked the commitment, the willingness to embrace the dark side completely. Zannah watched these training sessions with interest. She also watched Hetton's guards, noting their positions, their routines, their weaknesses. Something felt wrong about this arrangement. Hetton had given in too easily. Bane's reputation alone should have made the man more cautious. On the 4th night, her suspicions were confirmed. She was meditating in her assigned quarters when she felt a disturbance in the Force, multiple presences converging on Bane's location. She grabbed her lightsaber and ran. The compound's main hall had become a battlefield. Hetton stood at one end, his own lightsaber ignited, blue blade humming. Around him were 5 others, all wielding lightsabers, all moving with trained coordination, dark Jedi, fallen members of the Order who'd found employment as assassins and enforcers. And they were attacking Bane. The Sith Lord stood in the center, his red blade a blur of motion, the obelisks making him nearly impossible to wound. But there were too many attackers, and Bane's movements were slower than they should have been. The parasites were affecting his flexibility, his speed. Hetton called out over the clash of blades. "I don't need your training, Bane. I need your power. Kill him, and I'll triple your payment." The Dark Jedi pressed their assault. Bane deflected, counterattacked, killed one with a vicious slash across the throat. But another blade scored his leg, finding a gap between the obelisks. He stumbled. Zannah didn't think, she acted. Her double-bladed lightsaber ignited as she vaulted into the fray. She landed between Bane and 2 of the attackers, her crimson blade spinning in defensive patterns. One of the Dark Jedi lunged at her. She parried, redirected his momentum, and drove her blade through his chest in a single fluid motion. Form 3. Wait for the opening. Another attacked from her left. She blocked high, then low, her blades moving in perfect circles, creating an impenetrable barrier. The attacker grew frustrated, pressing harder, leaving himself exposed. Zannah's blade found his throat. But her real weapon wasn't the lightsaber. She reached out with the Force, touching the minds of the remaining Dark Jedi, and she showed them hell. Suddenly, they weren't fighting in Hetton's compound anymore. They were drowning in fire. The walls melted around them, ceiling collapsing, flames consuming everything. They screamed, breaking formation, swinging wildly at enemies that didn't exist. Bane recovered and cut them down one by one, his red blade finding hearts and spines with brutal efficiency. Within moments, only Hetton remained. The former Jedi backed toward the exit, his lightsaber shaking in his grip. "Wait," he gasped. "We can negotiate. I have credits, artifacts, whatever you want." Bane advanced slowly, the obelisks rippling with his barely contained rage. "You tried to kill me. You betrayed our agreement. It was just business, nothing personal." "Everything is personal." Bane raised his blade. The dark side doesn't forgive weakness. The duel lasted seconds. Hetton had skill, but he had no conviction, no true power. Bane overwhelmed him with pure aggression, battering down his defenses until an opening appeared. The red blade took Hetton's head cleanly. Silence settled over the hall. Zannah deactivated her lightsaber. The bodies of the Dark Jedi lay scattered around them, blood pooling on the polished floor. Her heart raced, adrenaline still pumping, but her mind was calm. She'd made a choice to save Bane, to prove her loyalty. Not because she loved him, not because she feared him, but because killing a weakened master brought no honor. When she challenged Bane, it would be face to face, both at full strength. That was the way of the Sith. That was the rule of two. Bane turned to her. His breathing was heavy, the obelisks glowing faintly from the dark side energy he'd channeled. "Why did you help me?" "Because you're my master, and you deserved better than an ambush by cowards." He studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You could have let them kill me, taken your freedom, claimed the title of Dark Lord." "I will claim that title," Zannah said, "but I'll earn it properly." Something like respect flickered in Bane's eyes. "Perhaps you will." They searched Hetton's compound through the night, finding his vault of artifacts and data. The navigational charts for Prakith were there, along with research notes about Darth Bane, detailed schematics of the fortress layout, and references to the traps and guardians within. Bane copied everything to a datapad. "This information is worth more than Hetton's life," he said. "We leave for Prakith at dawn." Zannah looked at the bodies still lying in the hall. "What about them?" "Leave them. Let Hetton's servants deal with the mess. We have more important concerns." They returned to their ship as the sun rose over Nal Hutter's swamps. The platform was slick with morning dew. Guards who'd survived the night watched them leave with fearful eyes, making no attempt to stop them. As the ship lifted off, Zannah stood at the viewport, watching the compound shrink below. She'd killed 4 people tonight, not her first kills, but the first in open combat against trained opponents. And she'd felt nothing. No guilt, no horror, just satisfaction at having passed another test. The dark side had consumed her completely now. There was no turning back, no redemption, no light waiting at the end of this path. Only power, only the eventual confrontation with Bane, only the destiny she'd chosen 10 years ago on Ruusan, when she'd taken his hand and let him name her Zannah. Bane entered the cabin, moving to the pilot's controls. His leg wound had already stopped bleeding, the obelisk sealing the injury. "Prakith is 3 days away through hyperspace," he said. "Rest while you can. The fortress will test us both." Zannah nodded and retreated to her quarters. She lay on the narrow bunk, closing her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Her mind churned with questions. What would they find in Ande's tomb? Would the holocron really be there? And if Bane learned essence transfer, would she truly be able to stop him when the time came? She didn't have answers, only determination. Outside the viewport, stars stretched into lines as the ship jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, Nal Hutta and its secrets faded into the past. Ahead lay Prakith, the deep core, and the knowledge that might make Bane immortal, or give Zannah the weapon she needed to destroy him. The deep core was beautiful in the way that death was beautiful. Stars packed so densely that navigation became more art than science. Gravity wells overlapping in chaotic patterns, stellar phenomena that could shred a ship's shields in seconds. Bane piloted through it all with steady hands, following Hetton's charts, making micro-adjustments every few minutes to account for the shifting maze of celestial hazards. Zannah watched from the co-pilot seat, mesmerized by the view. She'd never seen anything like this. In the core worlds, you could see individual stars, count them, map them. Here they blurred together into rivers of light, so bright that the viewport had to dim automatically to protect their eyes. This is why the deep core remains mostly unexplored, Bane said, without looking away from his instruments. Most pilots would be dead within an hour of entering this region. The old Sith chose their strongholds well. How much longer? 6 hours if we don't encounter any unexpected obstacles. The Bane's jaw tightened as another gravity well tugged at their trajectory. He compensated smoothly. Get some rest. You'll need it. But Zannah couldn't rest. Something felt wrong. A disturbance in the force, subtle but persistent. She closed her eyes, reaching out, trying to identify the source. There behind them, multiple force signatures growing closer. "Master," she said quietly. "We're being followed." Bane checked his sensors. Nothing appeared on the scopes. "Are you certain?" "Yes. 3 ships, maybe 4. They're masking their presence somehow, but I can feel them." And Bane's expression darkened. He diverted power to the rear sensors, boosting their range. After a moment, faint contacts appeared at the edge of detection. "You're right. They're good, professional hunters. Who would follow us into the deep core? Someone with resources and motivation." Bane pulled up the sensor data, analyzing the pursuit craft's energy signatures. These are expensive ships, military-grade stealth systems. Whoever hired them paid a fortune. The answer came to Zannah suddenly, a flash of intuition. Hetton. Before we killed him, he must have sent word, hired backup, in case his ambush failed. That's possible. Or Bane paused, considering, do you remember the mission you carried out on Sereno 2 years ago? The noble you killed? The one whose heart stopped? What about him? He had a daughter, Princess Sarah. She inherited his title and his wealth. The Bane's fingers moved across the controls, coaxing more speed from the engines. "I received intelligence 6 months ago that she was asking questions, hiring investigators, looking for her father's killer. You think she found us?" "I think it's likely." Bane glanced at the pursuit craft on the sensors. "And if she's wealthy enough to hire assassins with ships like these, she's wealthy enough to be a problem. Can we outrun them?" "Not and still reach pricey. The navigation here requires precision. If we push too hard, we'll fly into a gravity well and be crushed." Bane made a decision, adjusting their course slightly. "We'll have to deal with them when we land." The hours crawled by. The pursuit craft maintained their distance, neither closing nor falling back. Professional work. They were content to follow, to wait for Bane and Zannah to land before making their move, probably planning to ambush them on the surface, where stealth and surprise would offer advantages. Zannah spent the time preparing. She checked her lightsaber, meditated to center herself, reviewed what she knew about professional assassins and their tactics. These wouldn't be like Hetton's dark Jedi, motivated by credits and ego. True professionals were methodical, patient, deadly. Good. She needed the challenge. Prakith finally emerged from the stellar chaos, a dark world orbiting a dying red star. Its surface was gray and lifeless, the atmosphere thin but breathable. Ancient ruins dotted the landscape, remnants of Sith civilization from millennia past. Bane brought them down near the largest structure, a fortress built into the side of a mountain. Black stone walls rose hundreds of meters, unmarked by time or weather. The architecture was brutalist, intimidating, designed to inspire fear. The pursuit craft landed 2 kilometers away, maintaining their distance. "They're setting up," Bane observed, watching the sensor readings, probably deploying surveillance equipment, studying our approach to the fortress. "How many?" The sensors registered 4 ships. Assuming 2 operators per craft, we're looking at 8 hostiles minimum. Possibly more if they packed additional personnel. 8 trained killers. Zannah felt a thrill of anticipation rather than fear. Those are acceptable odds. Bane gave her a sharp look. "Don't get overconfident. Confidence kills more Sith than the Jedi ever did." They gathered their equipment and exited the ship. Prakith's air was cold and dry, tasting of metal and ancient dust. The fortress loomed above them, its entrance a massive doorway carved with Sith script. Zannah read the words as they approached. "Here lies Darth Undead, the immortal. Let those who seek his wisdom face his wrath." "Welcoming," Zannah muttered. The Sith didn't build monuments to welcome visitors. Bane ignited his lightsaber, using its red glow to illuminate the entrance. They built them to kill trespassers. They entered the fortress, leaving the assassins to their surveillance. The interior was a maze of corridors and chambers, each one trapped and guarded. Bane navigated using Hetton's schematics, but even with the maps, they triggered defenses. Blade traps sprung from walls. Poisoned darts shot from hidden mechanisms. The floor in one corridor suddenly disappeared, revealing a pit filled with stakes. Bane and Zannah used the Force to leap across, landing safely on the other side. In a lower chamber, they encountered the first Guardians, creatures made from Sith alchemy, humanoid but twisted, their bodies reinforced with metal and dark side energy. They attacked with mindless aggression. Bane cut through them with brutal efficiency, while Zannah used her illusions to disorient and confuse, making them attack each other. The deeper they went, the stronger the dark side became. It pressed against their minds like a physical weight, whispering, testing their resolve. Weaker Force users would have gone mad. But Bane and Zannah were not weak. They reached the central tomb after 6 hours of fighting through defenses. The chamber was circular, domed ceiling carved with constellations that no longer existed. In the center, on a raised platform, sat a sarcophagus made of polished black stone. And resting on top of the sarcophagus was a pyramid, small, intricate, glowing faintly with dark side energy. Darth Ander's holocron. Bane approached slowly, reverently. "This is it. Millennia of Sith knowledge, the secret to immortality." He reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the pyramid, it activated. Light erupted from its apex, coalescing into a figure, a hologram of an ancient Sith, robed and hooded, his face hidden in shadow. The gatekeeper, Andu's preserved personality. "Who dares disturb my rest?" the figure demanded. Its voice echoed through the chamber like grinding stone. "I am Darth Bane, last of the Sith. I seek your knowledge." The gatekeeper laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Last of the Sith, how the mighty have fallen. In my day we ruled galaxies. Now there is only one. I have preserved the Sith when they would have destroyed themselves," Bane said. "The rule of 2 ensures our survival and eventual victory." "The rule of 2, Anded's tone dripped with contempt. "You speak of death and succession as if they are virtues. I transcended death. I achieved true immortality. And you, little Bane, wish to learn my secrets. Yes. Why would I teach you? What makes you worthy? Because I will carry on the Sith legacy. Because I refuse to let death end my work. The gatekeeper was silent for a moment. Then it spoke again. You are weak. I can see the parasites consuming your flesh. You come to me not from strength, but from desperation, and desperation makes you unworthy. Teach me, Bane demanded, his voice hardening, or I will tear this holocron apart and extract the knowledge by force. You cannot force me. The gatekeeper's hologram flickered. I am immortal. I am eternal. I am Darth, indeed, and you are nothing. Bane's hand closed around the holocron. The obelisks rippled across his body, feeding on his rising fury. The dark side energy in the chamber thickened, responding to his rage. But the holocron remained locked, and he refused to yield. Zannah watched this exchange with growing concern. Bane's obsession was consuming him. The holocron had become everything, and when obsession ruled a Sith, mistakes followed. A sound echoed from the corridor behind them. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with tactical precision. The assassins had entered the fortress. But Bane heard them too. He deactivated the holocron and secured it in his pack. We're leaving now. They ran back through the corridors, moving faster now, no longer concerned with traps they'd already triggered. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Blaster fire echoed through the stone passages. The assassins had thermal imaging, motion sensors, all the technology that credits could buy. Bane and Zannah reached the entrance chamber just as the first assassin appeared. He wore armor, full body coverage, helmet with a targeting visor, professional gear. He raised a blaster rifle. Bane deflected the shots with his lightsaber, the bolts ricocheting harmlessly. Zannah reached out with the Force, touching the assassin's mind. She showed him his ship exploding, his partner's bodies burning, his own death approaching. The assassin hesitated. That moment of hesitation was all Bane needed. His blade took the man's head. More assassins poured into the chamber. 8 of them, just as Bane had predicted. They spread out, taking cover behind pillars and debris, laying down coordinated fire. This wasn't a wild charge. This was a professional kill team executing a well-rehearsed plan. Zannah ignited her double-bladed lightsaber, deflecting shots from 2 directions simultaneously. The Form 3 training took over. She didn't attack. She defended, waited, let them waste their ammunition. Bane charged forward, using his obelisk armor to absorb shots that slipped through his defense. He reached the nearest pillar and dragged the assassin hiding there into the open. The man died screaming. But one of the others had a different weapon. A sonic disruptor, illegal in Republic space, devastating against organic targets. The weapon fired. The sound wave hit Bane square in the chest. He staggered, the obelisks shrieking as the vibrations disrupted their connection to his body. Blood leaked from beneath the parasites. Zannah felt a spike of alarm. If Bane fell here, the rule of 2 died with him. No holocron, no knowledge, nothing. She couldn't allow that. She released the full force of her Sith sorcery, abandoning restraint, throwing everything she had into the minds of the remaining assassins. They saw hell. Their armor melted into their skin, their weapons turned into snakes, their companions transformed into demons. The fortress became a living nightmare, walls closing in, floor opening into bottomless voids. Reality ceased to exist for them, replaced by an endless cascade of horror. They screamed, dropped their weapons, clawed at their helmets. Some shot each other. Others ran blindly into walls. One threw himself off the entrance platform, falling to his death on the rocks below. Within minutes, all of them were dead or dying. Zannah released the illusions and collapsed to her knees, exhausted. Using that much power at once left her drained, her connection to the Force temporarily depleted. Bane recovered more slowly, pressing a hand to his chest where the sonic blast had hit. Blood stained his fingers. The obelisks in that area were dead, their shells cracked and leaking. "We need to leave," he said through gritted teeth, "before more arrive." They limped back to their ship, supporting each other. The assassins' vessels sat empty in the distance. Zannah wanted to search them, but Bane refused. No time. Princess Sarah would send reinforcements. Once these killers failed to report, the ship lifted off from Prakith, leaving the dead behind. As they jumped to hyperspace, Zannah finally allowed herself to process what had happened. She'd saved Bane, again, not out of loyalty, but out of necessity. His death would have been wasteful, pointless. But the pattern was becoming clear. Bane was weakening. The obelisks were killing him slowly, and now with Undida's holocron refusing to teach him, his desperation would only grow. The final confrontation was approaching faster than either of them anticipated. And when it came, Zannah would be ready. For 3 months, Bane worked on unlocking the holocron. They returned to Ambria, to the dwelling that had become their base. Bane spent his days and nights in meditation, holding the pyramid, attempting to convince Anda's gatekeeper to reveal its secrets. Sometimes Zannah would hear him arguing with the hologram, his voice rising in frustration as the ancient Sith mocked him. "You are unworthy. You are dying. You are desperate." The obelisks continued their spread. They'd reached Bane's jaw now, creeping toward his ears. The pain lines around his eyes deepened. His movements became more labored. Even simple tasks, like walking or lifting objects, required visible effort. Zannah watched this deterioration with mixed feelings. Part of her, the part that craved power and advancement, whispered that his weakness was her opportunity. Strike now, end him while he's vulnerable. But another part, the part trained in patience and strategy, countered that argument. Killing Bane while he was weakened proved nothing. Any fool with a blade could kill a dying man. The rule of two demanded more. It demanded that the apprentice surpass the master at his peak. Only then would the Sith truly evolve. Besides, there was another consideration. Zannah still had much to learn. Bane's knowledge of Sith philosophy, his understanding of long-term strategy, his insights into manipulating galactic politics, these things couldn't be found in holocrons. They had to be taught. And if Bane died before passing on everything he knew, that knowledge died with him. So she waited, and she studied. While Bane obsessed over the holocron, Zannah delved deeper into Sith sorcery. She practiced creating illusions of increasing complexity, learning to maintain them over longer durations, to affect multiple minds simultaneously, to make the false seem more real than reality itself. She also began researching essence transfer herself, using the library's resources. If Bane eventually unlocked that knowledge, she needed to understand how to defend against it, how to protect her mind and body from invasion. The technique, as far as she could determine, required several components. First, a profound mastery of the dark side. Second, a complete dissolution of attachment to one's current body. Third, the ability to exist as pure consciousness, unbound by flesh. And fourth, the strength of will to overwhelm another person's mind and claim their body as your own. It was, essentially, the ultimate violation, not merely killing someone, but erasing them entirely and wearing their skin. The Jedi would call it abomination. They would be right. But power cared nothing for morality, and the Sith had never concerned themselves with right and wrong, only with strength and weakness. Zannah memorized mental techniques for fortifying her consciousness. Meditation exercises that strengthened her sense of self, ways to anchor her identity so deeply that no external force could uproot it. She practiced these in secret, never mentioning them to Bane. If he suspected she was preparing to resist essence transfer, he might accelerate his plans. Better to let him think she remained ignorant. On the 97th day after their return from Prakith, something changed. Zannah was outside, practicing lightsaber forms against training remotes, when she felt a surge in the Force, a wave of dark side energy that made the air taste like copper. She deactivated her weapon and ran inside. Bane sat in the library, the holocron floating before him, and Dado's gatekeeper manifested in full holographic form. But unlike previous manifestations, this one wasn't mocking or dismissive, it was teaching. The consciousness must be stripped from its corporeal housing and its voice intoned, reduced to its essential form. Only then can it migrate to a new vessel. Bane's eyes were closed, his breathing deep and measured. He was absorbing every word, committing it to memory. Zannah stood in the doorway, unnoticed. She watched as the ancient Sith revealed secrets that had been locked away for millennia. The meditation techniques, the visualization exercises, the moment of transference when consciousness leaped from one body to another. It took hours. When the lesson finally ended, the gatekeeper faded and the holocron went dark. Bane opened his eyes. They burned with renewed purpose. He saw Zannah. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Bane said, "I've done it. I've unlocked the final secret." "Congratulations, Master." Zannah kept her voice neutral. "So you can live forever now." "Not yet. The technique requires practice, refinement." And Bane stood slowly, wincing as the obelisks shifted. "I need to resolve the parasite problem first. I can't attempt essence transfer while they're attached. The shock might kill both me and the target body. Can they be removed? Not safely. Not while they're feeding on the dark side energy I channel." Bane moved to the window, looking out at Ambria's desert. There might be one way: Force lightning. Applied directly to the obelisks, it would kill them, but it would also cause me immense pain. Possibly fatal levels of shock. "You want me to do it," Zannah realized. "You're the only one who can. I lack the flexibility to target my own body properly, and I can't risk going to an outside Force user. Too many questions, too much exposure." This was it. The moment of vulnerability. Bane was placing his life entirely in her hands. One miscalculation with the lightning, one deliberate error, and he would die. She would be free. The rule of two would pass to her. But not like this. When she asked, "Soon I need to prepare, meditate, center myself, tomorrow night." Zannah nodded and left the library. Her mind raced. Tomorrow night, Bane would be at her mercy, completely defenseless. If she chose to kill him, no one would ever know. She could claim the obelisks had proved too much, that the attempt to remove them had failed. She spent that night awake, wrestling with the decision. The dark side whispered, "Kill him, take what's yours, you've earned it, you're strong enough." But another voice countered, "You're not ready, not truly, you've never faced him, at full strength. If you kill him now, you'll always wonder, always doubt." By morning, she'd made her choice. The procedure took place in the meditation chamber, where Bane had first taught her to touch the dark side a decade ago. He'd stripped away his clothing, revealing the full extent of the obelisk infestation. The parasites covered most of his torso, chest, back, shoulders. They pulsed with dark energy, bonded so deeply to his flesh that removing them would leave him covered in wounds. Bane lay on the stone floor, his arms spread, his breathing controlled. "Do it quickly," he said, "all at once. Don't hesitate. or the shock will kill me." Zannah raised her hands. She channeled the force, feeling electricity gather in her palms. Purple-white lightning crackled between her fingers. She hesitated. This was the moment. Kill him or save him. End the master or preserve him. "Now," Bane commanded. Zannah released the lightning. It poured from her hands in torrents, washing over Bane's body. The Obelisks shrieked, a sound like metal grinding against metal. They convulsed, trying to burrow deeper into his flesh, but the electricity cooked them from within. One by one their shells cracked, their legs released. They fell away, leaving bloody wounds where they'd been attached. Bane screamed, his back arched, every muscle locked in agony. But Zannah didn't stop. She poured more lightning, more power, ensuring every single parasite died. The last one finally released, falling to the floor with a wet sound. Zannah cut off the lightning. Her arms trembled from the effort. Her connection to the force felt temporarily depleted. Bane lay motionless. For a terrible moment, Zannah thought she'd killed him anyway. Then his chest rose, fell, rose again. He was breathing. She knelt beside him, examining the damage. His torso was a mess of open wounds, bleeding freely, but obelisks secreted a toxin that prevented healing. With them removed, his body could finally begin repairing itself. Zannah used the force to slow the bleeding, then bandaged the worst wounds with supplies from their medical kit. Bane remained unconscious through all of it, his body in shock. She carried him to his quarters, laying him on the bed with surprising gentleness. For the first time in 10 years, she saw her master without his armor, without the parasites that had defined him for so long. He looked smaller somehow, more human, more vulnerable. She stayed with him through the night, monitoring his vital signs, changing bandages when blood soaked through. The wounds were healing, slowly but visibly. The force was accelerating his recovery, now that the obelisks weren't interfering. By morning, Bane opened his eyes. "You saved me," he said. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I did what was necessary. You could have killed me, let the lightning cook me from the inside, blamed it on the procedure." Bane's gaze was sharp despite his weakness. "Why didn't you?" Zannah met his eyes. "Because when I defeat you, Master, it will be in fair combat, not like this, not when you're helpless." Something flickered across Bane's face, respect perhaps, or calculation. The line between the two was often thin. "You're more patient than I was at your age," he said. "When I was ready to challenge my own master, I didn't hesitate. I killed him the moment opportunity presented itself." "And did that prove you were stronger?" "It proved I was smarter, that I could recognize and exploit weakness." Bane tried to sit up, grimaced, lay back down. "But perhaps you're right. Perhaps true strength requires a different kind of proof." He recovered over the following weeks. The scars remained, ridged tissue covering most of his torso, but the pain was gone. For the first time since the obelisks had bonded to him, Bane could move freely, could sleep without agony, could channel the force without the parasites feeding on it. He should have been grateful, relieved. But instead, Zannah noticed a change in him, a new wariness, a distance that hadn't been there before. He watched her now, studied her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. The dynamic between them had shifted. She'd held his life in her hands and chosen to preserve it. That act of mercy, or strategy, or whatever it was, had altered their relationship in ways neither could fully articulate. Bane resumed his training, but with renewed intensity. He pushed himself harder, rebuilding strength and flexibility. Without the obelisk armor, he practiced lightsaber combat for hours each day, relearning movement patterns that the parasites had made impossible. And at night, when he thought Zannah was asleep, She felt him working with Andita's holocron, learning, perfecting, preparing. The essence transfer technique was nearly mastered. She could sense it. Soon Bane would be ready to attempt it. And when that moment came, he would need a body. A young body, a powerful body, a body strong in the Force. Her body. The realization crystallized one evening. As she watched him meditate, she'd saved his life. Yes, but in doing so, she'd made herself the perfect target. Young, trained, compatible with his consciousness, everything he needed for the transference. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, working through scenarios. If Bane attempted essence transfer, could she stop him? Her mental defenses were strong, but were they strong enough? He had decades more experience, decades more knowledge. She needed an advantage, something he wouldn't expect. The answer came to her as dawn broke over Ambria's horizon. She couldn't defend against essence transfer by simply being strong. She needed to turn it into a trap, to make her mind not just a fortress but a prison, so that if Bane's consciousness entered, it couldn't escape. The technique would require modifications to standard mental defense practices. Instead of keeping invaders out, she would let them in, then seal the entrance behind them, trap the invading consciousness in a maze of her own construction, let it wander through false memories and constructed realities until it exhausted itself. Then crush it. She began working on this secretly, adding layers to her mental landscape, creating corridors that looped back on themselves, chambers that shifted and changed, a labyrinth designed specifically to confuse and contain an invading presence. Weeks passed, then months. Bane's strength returned fully. He moved with his old confidence, his old deadly grace. The scars remained visible, but they no longer limited him. One evening, he called Zannah to the library. She found him standing at the window, looking out at the setting suns. The holocron sat on the table behind him, dormant. "I've completed my studies," he said, without turning. "The essence transfer technique is perfected. I could attempt it now if I chose." Zannah's hand moved closer to her lightsaber, subtle but ready. "Will you?" Bane turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. "That depends on you." "On me." The rule of two exists for a purpose, to ensure each generation of Sith is stronger than the last. But I've realized something over these months of recovery. He moved closer, stopping just outside striking distance. Immortality contradicts that purpose. If the master never dies, the apprentice never rises. Stagnation replaces evolution. "So you won't attempt the transfer?" "I didn't say that." Bane's eyes locked onto hers. "I'm saying that perhaps the transfer shouldn't be the goal. Perhaps there's another way to preserve knowledge without violating the rule of two." "What way?" "Teaching, truly teaching. Passing on everything I know, not in stolen moments between missions, but completely, thoroughly, so that when you eventually defeat me, nothing is lost." Bane stepped closer. "I could do that. Spend the next few years ensuring you know everything I know, and then when you're ready, we face each other properly. Master against apprentice. Winner takes all. And the holocron, the essence transfer. I'll lock that knowledge away. Study it, perhaps. Understand it fully, but not use it." Bane extended his hand. "What do you say, apprentice? Do we have an accord?" Zannah stared at his hand. This was unexpected. A trap, perhaps, or genuine recognition that immortality betrayed everything the Sith should be. Either way, it didn't matter. The outcome remained the same. One day she would face him. One day she would prove herself worthy. And on that day, Bane's essence transfer technique, mastered or not, would fail against her prepared defenses. She took his hand. "We have an accord." They shook, master and apprentice, teacher and student. Two Sith, bound by a rule that demanded one would eventually destroy the other. But not today. Today, there was still knowledge to share, still skills to perfect, still time before the final test. Zannah returned to her quarters that night with a strange sense of calm. The path ahead was clear now. No more uncertainty. No more wondering when Bane would strike or how she should respond. There would be training. There would be missions. There would be years of preparation. And then there would be the duel. She lay down and closed her eyes. Sleep came easily. In her dreams, she stood in an arena of black stone, lightsaber ignited, facing a figure in shadow. The figure stepped forward into the light. It was Bane, but also not Bane, something else. Something that had once been her master, but had transformed into something darker, something that refused to accept death. The dream Zannah raised her blade. The shadow rushed forward. And then she woke. Morning light filtered through the window. Outside, Ambria's desert stretched endlessly, patient and timeless. Somewhere in the dwelling, Bane was already awake, already preparing for another day of training. Zannah rose and dressed. She clipped her lightsaber to her belt, checked her appearance in the mirror. The girl called Rain was long gone. The orphan who'd watched her cousin die was buried under years of dark side training. Only Zannah remained, apprentice, assassin, future Dark Lord of the Sith. She left her quarters and went to join her master for breakfast. They ate in silence, as they often did. Words were unnecessary between Sith who understood each other this well. After the meal, Bane stood. "We're leaving Ambria," he announced. "Tomorrow, there's work to be done in the galaxy. Political manipulation, strategic positioning, the kind of long-term planning that will bear fruit generations from now." "Where are we going?" "Coruscant first, then wherever the work takes us." Bane looked at her. "The Republic believes we're extinct. We'll keep it that way. But we'll also ensure that when our descendants are ready, the entire structure will be so corrupted, so weakened, that it will fall at the slightest push." "The Sith Grand Plan," Zannah said. She'd read about it in Bane's writings. The 1,000-year strategy to destroy the Jedi and claim the galaxy. "Exactly. And you'll be part of it. Not just as my apprentice, but as the next link in the chain." Bane's expression hardened. "We are patient, we are inevitable, and we will win." Zannah nodded. She believed him, not because she trusted him, but because she understood the logic. The Republic was complacent, the Jedi were arrogant, and the Sith, hidden in shadow, had time on their side. Centuries of time. They spent that final day on Ambria packing their belongings, securing their holocrons, preparing the ship. As the sun set one last time over the desert, Zannah stood outside the dwelling, taking in the view. This place had been her home for a decade. Here she'd transformed from a traumatized child into a weapon. Here she'd learned to touch the dark side. Here she'd become Sith. But it was time to move forward. Time to step into the larger galaxy and begin the real work. Behind her, Bane emerged from the dwelling. "Ready?" he asked. Zannah turned away from the sunset. "Yes, Master, I'm ready." They boarded the ship together. The engines hummed to life. The vessel lifted from the desert floor, rising into Ambria's atmosphere, breaking through into the black of space. Below, the dwelling grew smaller, then vanished entirely. Ahead, the galaxy waited, unsuspecting, unprepared. The Sith were coming, not with armies, not with fleets, but with patience, with cunning, with a plan that would unfold over centuries. And at the heart of that plan were two figures, master and apprentice, Bane and Zannah. The rule of two made manifest. The ship jumped to hyperspace, and Ambria disappeared into the past. What lay ahead was unknown, dangerous, filled with possibility. Zannah settled into the pilot seat, watching the stars stretch into lines. Her hand rested on her lightsaber, ready, always ready. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Jedi meditated in their temple, believing they'd won, believing the darkness was defeated. They were wrong. The darkness endured, it adapted, it waited. And when the time was right, it would rise again. Coruscant was everything, Ambria was not. Where the desert planet offered silence and isolation, the Republic capital roared with endless noise, trillions of beings packed onto a single world, their lives layered vertically in towers that scraped the clouds. Speeders filled the air lanes in rivers of light. Holographic advertisements blazed from every surface. The city never slept, never quieted, never stopped consuming. Zannah found it overwhelming at first. The sheer density of minds pressed against her force senses like static. She'd spent 10 years in the empty wastes where the only consciousness for kilometers was her own and Bane's. Here, millions of thoughts crashed against her awareness every second. But she adapted. Within days, she learned to filter the noise, to create barriers that let her move through crowds without drowning in their collective consciousness. It was, she realized, another form of training. The desert taught isolation and focus. The city taught discrimination and control. They established a base in the lower levels, far from the Senate towers and Jedi temple. Down here, where sunlight never reached, the city showed its true face. Criminal syndicates, black markets, beings who asked no questions as long as credits changed hands. Perfect territory for Sith, who needed to remain invisible. Bane rented a nondescript apartment under a false identity. 3 rooms, minimal furnishings, nothing that would attract attention. He'd done this before, Zannah realized, many times, building safe houses, creating aliases, laying groundwork that might not be used for decades. The work began immediately. Bane had contacts throughout Coruscant's underworld, informants and agents who didn't know they served the Sith. He met with them in shadowed cantinas and abandoned warehouses, gathering intelligence about Republic politics, Jedi movements, corporate mergers, anything that might prove useful. Zannah accompanied him, watching, learning. She saw how he manipulated conversations, planting suggestions so subtly that people thought the ideas were their own. How he identified leverage points in complex systems, how he played factions against each other for long-term advantage. One evening, they met with a Mune banker in a private dining room overlooking the Senate district. The banker, Higo Damask, was young but already influential in the intergalactic banking clan. He wore expensive robes and spoke with calculated precision. "I've reviewed your investment proposals," Damask said, reviewing a datapad. "Your shell corporations show impressive returns, almost too impressive." "Nothing illegal," Bane assured him, "just profitable timing." "Timing?" Damask smiled thinly. "You seem to have excellent timing across multiple sectors. Mining, shipping, pharmaceuticals. It's as if you can predict market movements before they happen." "Good research," Bane replied, "and patience. Most investors want immediate returns, I think in decades." "How refreshing." Damask set down the datapad. "I think we can do business together. Your capital combined with my banking connections could prove very lucrative." They shook hands. The meeting concluded. As they left, Zannah asked quietly, "Is he force sensitive?" "No," Bane said, "but he's useful. And in 30 years, when our plans require financial infrastructure, he'll be perfectly positioned to provide it. You're building a network that won't pay off for decades. The grand plan requires patience. We plant seeds now that our successors will harvest." Bane led them down a side corridor, away from the main pedestrian flow. "Every Sith after us will inherit a galaxy gradually poisoned against the Jedi, corrupted from within. ready to fall. What if we don't live to see it? We won't. That's the point. Bane stopped walking, turned to face her. The old Sith were obsessed with personal glory. They wanted to conquer the galaxy themselves. But true power lies in creating something that outlasts you, in being part of a chain that eventually encircles everything. Zannah absorbed this philosophy. It was brilliant in its patience, horrifying in its scope, and completely contrary to the Jedi understanding of the Sith as impulsive, power-hungry fools. The Jedi believed they'd won at Ruusan. They had no idea the real war had only just begun. Over the following months, Bane sent Zannah on solo missions throughout the city. Small tasks at first, delivering messages, retrieving information, testing her ability to operate independently in an urban environment. Then more complex assignments. She infiltrated a corporate boardroom disguised as a secretary, planting surveillance equipment that would feed data to Bane's network for years. She manipulated a junior senator into proposing legislation that seemed harmless but would create loopholes exploitable decades later. She assassinated a journalist who'd gotten too close to uncovering one of Bane's shell corporations, making it look like a random mugging. Each success built her confidence. Each mission refined her skills. She was becoming more than just an apprentice. She was becoming an operative, a shadow player in galactic politics. It was during one of these missions that she first encountered Set Hearth. She'd been tasked with retrieving a Sith artifact from a private collector, a Twi'lek antiquities dealer who operated in the mid-levels. The artifact was a meditation crystal, nothing powerful but useful for training. The dealer had acquired it through legal channels and didn't know its true nature. Zannah planned to simply buy it, using one of Bane's accounts. Quick, clean, no complications. But when she arrived at the dealer's gallery, she felt another force presence. Someone else was there. Someone trying to hide their signature, but not succeeding completely. She entered cautiously, hand near her concealed lightsaber. The gallery was upscale, filled with artifacts from dozens of cultures, statues, weapons, religious icons, all arranged with artistic precision. The Twi'lek dealer greeted her warmly. "Welcome. How may I assist you today?" "I'm interested in meditation crystals," Zannah said. "I heard you recently acquired one." "Ah, yes." The dealer's expression flickered. "Actually, I've had another inquiry about that particular piece. Perhaps you'd like to see it together. Avoid any bidding conflicts." He led her to a back room, where another customer waited. Human male, mid-20s, well-dressed, dark hair, confident posture, and unmistakably strong in the Force. Their eyes met. Recognition flashed between them. Not personal recognition, but the understanding of what each other was. Force users, possibly dangerous. "This is Set Hearth," the dealer introduced, also interested in the crystal. Set extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you." Zannah shook it briefly. The contact let her read him more clearly. He'd been trained, formal lightsaber instruction, Force techniques beyond basic manipulation. But his signature was neither Jedi nor fully Sith, something in between. The dealer produced the crystal, a palm-sized piece of amber-colored stone. Beautiful, isn't it? From the outer rim, used by some ancient order for meditation and focus. Set examined it carefully, then looked at Zannah. "What's your interest in this?" "Meditation," she said simply. "And you?" "Similar purposes." His smile was practiced, charming. "Perhaps we could share it. Split the cost and the usage." "I prefer exclusive ownership." "So do I." Set's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Then I suppose we have a problem." The dealer looked between them nervously. "Perhaps an auction, highest bidder." "I'll pay double the asking price," Zannah said immediately. "Right now." "Triple," Set countered. The dealer's greed, lit up his face. This is turning into quite the profitable day. But Zannah had no intention of getting into a bidding war. She touched the Force, reaching into the dealer's mind, showing him exhaustion, showing him that the sale was complete, the credits transferred, the crystal handed over. The Twitlick's eyes glazed slightly. Yes, of course. Here you are. He handed the crystal to Zannah. Pleasure doing business. Set's expression shifted from charm to wariness. That was a neat trick. Just good negotiation. Zannah pocketed the crystal. Now if you'll... excuse me. She turned to leave, but Set followed her out of the gallery, matching her pace through the crowded corridor outside. You're not Jedi, he said quietly. Your technique, the way you manipulate minds, that's dark side training. Zannah kept walking. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, I can recognize it because I use similar methods. Set moved closer. I was trained by a fallen Jedi. Learned things the Order would never teach. You're like me, operating outside their rules. I'm nothing like you. Really? Then why are you here collecting Sith artifacts? Why hide your Force signature? Why use mind tricks on civilians? He grinned. We're the same. Might as well admit it. Zannah stopped walking. She turned to face him, letting a fraction of her true power show. We are not the same. You're a dabbler, a talented amateur, playing with forces you don't understand. I am Sith. Set's confidence faltered. For a moment, genuine fear flickered across his face. Then he recovered, stepping back, hands raised in mock surrender. Noted. No offense intended. Stay away from me, and stay away from Sith artifacts. Next time, I won't be so polite. She walked away, leaving him standing in the corridor. But she felt his eyes on her back, felt his thoughts churning. He was curious now, intrigued, and that made him potentially dangerous. She reported the encounter to Bane that evening, describing Set in detail. Bane listened carefully, then said, interesting. A dark side user operating independently in the capital. That could be useful or problematic. Should I eliminate him? Not yet, Bane considered. Follow him. Learn about him. If he's skilled and controllable, he might serve a purpose. If not, then yes, eliminate him before he draws Jedi attention to our presence. Over the following weeks, Zannah tracked Set Hoth through Coruscant's underworld. She discovered he worked as a freelance operative, taking contracts from various employers, retrieval jobs mostly. Occasionally assassinations. He used his Force abilities to give himself an edge but tried to keep them subtle, not wanting to attract Jedi scrutiny. He was good, skilled with a lightsaber, though he rarely used it openly, proficient in Force persuasion and basic telekinesis, quick thinking and adaptable. But he lacked commitment. She saw it in how he worked. He always left himself an exit, always had a backup plan, always prioritized his own survival over completing objectives. A mercenary mindset, not a Sith one. She reported this to Bane. He has talent but no discipline. Then he's not a threat, Bane concluded. Just another dark side dabbler who'll eventually make a mistake and get himself killed. Forget about him. But Zannah couldn't shake the feeling that Set would reappear eventually, that their paths would cross again under different circumstances. She was right. 2 months later, she was infiltrating a Republic military facility to steal research data when she encountered Set again. He was there on a separate contract. After different information, they literally bumped into each other in a restricted corridor. You, he said, surprised. You, she replied, equally caught off guard. Alarms began blaring. Someone had detected their intrusions. Well, Set said, drawing a lightsaber, this is awkward. Zannah ignited her double-bladed weapon extremely. Security forces converged from both ends of the corridor. They were trapped between two groups of armed soldiers. No easy escape route. Temporary alliance. Set suggested, fight our way out together, then part ways peacefully. Zannah calculated quickly. She could probably escape alone using force speed and illusions, but Set would likely be captured or killed, and his interrogation might reveal details about dark side users operating on Coruscant that could eventually lead to increased Jedi attention. Fine, she agreed. Follow my lead. They fought side by side, their lightsabers moving in coordinated patterns. Set used Form 2, Makashi, elegant and precise. Zannah used Form 3, defensive and efficient. Together they created a moving barrier that the security forces couldn't penetrate. She threw illusions ahead of them, making soldiers see empty corridors when they were actually running straight at them. Set used force pushes to scatter any who got too close. They reached an exterior balcony and leaped off together, using the force to slow their fall, landing on a lower level. They ran through the night city, putting distance between themselves and the facility. Finally, in an abandoned industrial sector, they stopped to catch their breath. "Thanks," Set said between gasps. "You didn't have to help me. I didn't do it for you. I did it to avoid complications. Still, I owe you one." He deactivated his lightsaber. "For what it's worth, you fight well, better than anyone I've sparred with. You haven't fought many Sith." "No, just you." Set looked at her curiously. "Your master, is he here on Coruscant?" "That's none of your concern." "Fair enough." He started to leave, then paused. "Look, I know you think I'm beneath you, probably right, but if you ever need help with something, a job that requires an extra hand, I'm available for the right price." "I won't need your help." "Maybe not, but the offer stands." Set gave a casual salute and disappeared into the shadows. Zannah returned to the safe house to find Bane waiting, arms crossed, expression dark. "You helped him," Bane said. "Why?" "To avoid exposure. His capture would have led to questions." "Well, you saw potential in him, saw a use for him." Bane stepped closer. "Don't lie to me, apprentice. I trained you. I know how you think." Zannah met his gaze steadily. "Maybe I thought he could be useful later. An expendable asset if we needed one." Bane studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps. But be careful. Attachments weaken us, even attachments to useful tools." "He's not an attachment. He's a resource." "Then treat him as such." Bane turned away. "And remember, when the time comes for you to face me, you'll stand alone. No allies, no help, just you and me and the rule of two." "I understand, Master." But as she lay in bed that night, Zannah thought about Set, about his talent, his cowardice, his potential, and she wondered if there might come a day when having an ally, even a flawed one, could make the difference between victory and death. The rule of two was absolute, but rules could be interpreted, bent, used creatively. She filed the thought away for future consideration. Set Hoth was still alive, still operating in the shadows. And if nothing else, he proved that she wasn't the only one walking the line between light and dark. The galaxy was full of gray spaces, and in those spaces, anything was possible. 3 years passed. Zannah turned 23, then 24, then 25. The missions continued. The grand plan advanced in microscopic increments. Shell corporations flourished. Political contacts deepened. The seeds planted on Coruscant began to sprout, invisible to everyone except those who knew where to look. But Bane grew worse. Without the obelisks, he should have been healthier, stronger. Instead, he aged rapidly. The scars covering his torso sometimes bled without reason. His movements became stiffer. His breathing labored. Nights found him awake, pacing their safe house, consumed by pain he couldn't voice. Zannah knew what was happening. The obelisks had fed on dark side energy for so long that removing them had created an imbalance. Banon's body no longer knew how to regulate the force properly. He was burning himself out from within. He needed a solution, and he'd found one. Essence transfer. The technique Andichua had taught him. The ability to abandon his failing body and claim a new one. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but knowing didn't make it easier when Bane finally announced his decision. They were on Tython, a world Bane had chosen specifically for this purpose, ancient, powerful in the Force, remote enough that they could work without interruption. He'd spent 6 months building a compound here, a fortress disguised as geological research station, hidden in plain sight. The facility had meditation chambers, training rooms, a library, and deep underground, a laboratory where Bane conducted experiments she wasn't permitted to see. One evening, he called her to his private study. She found him sitting at a desk, and Dadu's holocron glowing softly beside him. His face was gaunt, shadows deep under his eyes. "Sit," he said. Zannah took the chair opposite him. Tension crackled in the air between them. "My body is failing," Bane began without preamble. "Another year, maybe 2, and it will cease functioning entirely. The damage from the obelisks is irreversible. You could seek medical treatment, Baccayan to tanks, cybernetic augmentation. I'm not interested in prolonging this shell." The Bane's eyes locked onto hers. "I'm interested in replacing it." The words hung between them. Zannah kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced. This was it. The confrontation she'd been preparing for. "Essence transfer," she said carefully. "Yes, I've perfected the technique, practiced on lesser beings, moved my consciousness into animals, maintained control for hours before returning to my original form." Bane leaned forward. "It works, and I'm ready to attempt it permanently." "With what body?" "One strong in the Force, young, undamaged, compatible with my consciousness." His gaze never wavered. "I've considered many options over the years, but there's really only one logical choice. Deme, you." Bane said it without emotion, as if discussing logistics rather than the complete erasure of her identity. "You're the perfect vessel, trained, powerful, already familiar with Sith philosophy. My consciousness would integrate seamlessly." Zannah felt rage building, but suppressed it. Anger would cloud her judgment. "You would kill me. Erase everything I am, steal my body like a common thief. I would preserve everything we've built. The grand plan requires continuity. My death would mean starting over with a new apprentice, losing decades of accumulated knowledge. But if I continue in your body, nothing is lost. Everything is lost. I'm lost. You would become part of something greater." Bane stood, moving to the window. "Your consciousness wouldn't simply vanish. Parts of it would merge with mine. Your skills, your memories, they'd remain, integrated into a more perfect whole. That's not living. That's being devoured. That's evolution." Byrne turned back to face her. "The rule of 2 demands the apprentice surpass the master. But what if there's a better way? What if the master and apprentice can combine, creating something superior to either alone?" "You're perverting the rule, making excuses for cowardice." His expression hardened. "I'm adapting it for survival, for victory." Bane moved closer. "You have a choice, Zannah. Submit willingly, and the transition will be painless. Your best qualities will be preserved, or resist, and I'll take your body by force. Either way, the outcome is the same." Zannah stood slowly. She'd known this was coming. had prepared for years, but hearing it, stated so boldly, still sent ice through her veins. When she asked, 3 days, I need time to prepare, to fast and meditate and clear my mind. Bane gestured to the door. Until then, continue your training, make peace with what's coming. And if I run, I'll hunt you, take another body, and eliminate you as a failed experiment. His voice carried absolute certainty. You can't escape this, apprentice. One way or another, in 3 days, I will have a new body. The only question is whether you face it with dignity or fear. Zannah left the study, maintaining her composure until she reached her own quarters. Then she locked the door and began fortifying her mental defenses. Everything she'd learned about resisting essence transfer, every technique for anchoring her identity, every trap she'd constructed in her mindscape. She had 3 days, 3 days to prepare for the most important battle of her life. Not physical combat, though that might come, but mental warfare, a struggle for ownership of her own consciousness. She meditated through the night, diving deep into her psyche, examining every corner of her identity, her memories of Ledger's death, her first kill on Ruusan, her training with Bane, her missions, her victories, her fears. She took all of it and wove it together into an unbreakable core. This is who I am. Rain who became Zannah, Orphan who became Sith. This is my mind, my body, my power. No one would take it from her, not even Bane. The second day, she focused on the traps. She constructed false memory palaces in her mind, elaborate structures that would seem like her true consciousness, but were actually prisons. If Bane's essence entered her mind, she would guide him into one of these traps, then seal it behind him. Let him wander through constructed realities while she maintained actual control. The third day arrived too quickly. Bane summoned her to the underground laboratory. She'd never been inside before. The chamber was circular, carved from solid rock, covered in Sith runes that glowed faintly with dark side energy. In the center sat 2 meditation platforms, positioned facing each other. Bane stood beside one, wearing simple robes. He'd shaved his head. His scars stood out starkly against pale skin. He looked like a corpse already, a dead man refusing to accept his fate. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No," Zannah replied honestly, "but that won't stop you. Nothing will stop this. The galaxy needs continuity, needs what we've built." Bane gestured to the opposite platform. "Sit, we'll meditate together. When I initiate the transfer, try not to resist. It will only cause you pain." Zannah sat on the platform, crossing her legs, resting her hands on her knees. Her lightsaber hung at her belt, within easy reach. If this went wrong, if Bane succeeded, she would rather die fighting than live as a passenger in her own body. Bane sat opposite her. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, entering a meditative trance. The runes on the walls began to pulse brighter, responding to the force energy building in the chamber. Zannah closed her own eyes. She sank into her prepared defenses, felt the boundaries of her consciousness, the walls she'd constructed, the traps she'd laid. And then Bane's presence touched hers. It began subtly, a tendril of foreign awareness probing at her mind, testing her barriers, looking for weakness. She let it approach, neither resisting nor welcoming, neutral. The tendril pressed harder, began to penetrate. Bane's consciousness was vast, honed by decades of experience. It flowed into her mind like water, seeking every crack, every opening. Zannah maintained her composure. Let him in. Let him think he was succeeding. The traps wouldn't work if they were obvious. Deeper now, Bane's essence flooded through her thoughts, wrapping around her memories, trying to subsume her identity. She felt him rifling through her experiences, her childhood, her training, her missions, taking inventory of what he was claiming. And then she sprung the trap. The memory palace she'd constructed as bait suddenly closed around his consciousness. Walls of pure will slammed into place. Bane's essence found itself contained in a recreation of the Ruusan battlefield, surrounded by corpses and smoke, and the echo of the thought bomb. She felt his surprise, his sudden understanding that he'd been lured into a cage. "Clever girl," his mental voice whispered, but not clever enough. He began to tear through the memory palace. His power was immense. The walls she'd constructed started to crack. He would escape in minutes, maybe less. But minutes were enough. Zannah launched her counterattack. While Bane was distracted, breaking free, she invaded the parts of her mind he'd already penetrated, found the threads of his consciousness spread throughout her psyche, and began to strangle them. She used Sith sorcery, the skills she'd spent 15 years perfecting. Illusions not cast outward but inward. She showed Bane's invading essence nightmares from within, showed him his own death, his own failure, the end of everything he'd built. The mental battle escalated. Bardane broke free of the first trap, only to find 3 more waiting, each one more complex, each one designed specifically to confuse and contain an invading consciousness. But he kept coming, kept fighting. His will was iron, his determination absolute. In the physical world, their bodies convulsed. Blood leaked from Zannah's nose. Bane's scars reopened, painting his torso red. Neither moved from their meditation platforms, but the force in the chamber raged like a storm. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in the battle for consciousness. Zannah felt herself weakening, felt Bane's essence pressing closer to her core. If he reached it, if he wrapped his will around her fundamental self, she would be erased. She needed to end this now. She abandoned defense entirely, stopped trying to contain Bane's consciousness, and instead attacked it directly. She flooded her own mind with images of Larsa's death, of every moment she'd suffered, every pain, every loss, every reason she'd chosen darkness over light. "This is who I am," she screamed at the invading presence. "This is me. You can't take it because you can't understand it. You weren't there. You didn't live it. It's mine." The intensity of emotion crashed over Bane's essence like a physical force. He recoiled. For the first time since the battle began, he retreated. Zannah pressed her advantage. She showed him her determination, her will to survive. The years of preparation she'd invested specifically for this moment. She'd known he would try this, known and prepared, and he'd walked into her trap, thinking he was the hunter, when all along he was the prey. Bane's essence fragmented under the assault. His consciousness stretched too thin, trying to subsume hers, began to fracture. Pieces of him scattered throughout her mindscape, lost in the maze of false memories and constructed realities. She hunted those pieces down one by one, crushed them, absorbed the power they contained, while rejecting the identity behind them. And finally, after what felt like eternity, Bane's presence in her mind gutted and died. Zannah opened her eyes. She was still sitting on the meditation platform. Her body was her own. Her thoughts were her own. She'd won. Across from her, Bane's body slumped forward. His eyes were open but empty. His chest didn't rise or fall. He was dead, truly dead. His consciousness destroyed in the attempt to claim her body. Zannah stood on shaking legs. She approached Bane's corpse, checking for any signs of life. Nothing. The man who'd found her on Ruusan, who'd trained her for 15 years, who'd tried to steal her body and failed. Gone. She felt no sorrow, no grief, only exhaustion and grim satisfaction. She'd passed the final test, defeated the master. proven herself worthy of the title. She was now the Dark Lord of the Sith. The weight of that realization settled over her. She stood in the ruined chamber beside her dead master and contemplated what came next. She would need an apprentice, would need to continue the grand plan, would need to ensure everything Ben had built wasn't wasted. But first, she needed to rest. She left the laboratory, sealing it behind her. She would deal with Bane's body later. For now, she needed sleep, real sleep. For the first time in 3 days, she reached her quarters and collapsed on the bed. Sleep claimed her immediately. In her dreams, she stood on Ruusan again. But this time she wasn't a child. She was Darth Zannah, Dark Lord of the Sith. And when the Jedi approached, she didn't run. She destroyed them. Zannah woke to sunlight streaming through her window. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The battle, Bane's death, her victory. She sat up slowly, checking herself. No physical wounds, the blood from her nose had dried, but otherwise she was unharmed. Mentally, she felt different, stronger, as if defeating Bane's essence transfer attempt had tempered her consciousness like heated metal. She rose and made her way to the laboratory. The seal was undisturbed. She opened it and descended the stone stairs. Bane's body remained on the meditation platform, exactly as she'd left it. Already beginning to show signs of decomposition, she would need to dispose of it properly. Cremation, perhaps, the Sith way. But as she approached, something stopped her. A flicker in the Force, subtle, almost imperceptible. She froze, reaching out with her senses. Was it possible? Had some fragment of Bane's consciousness survived somehow, hiding in the corners of her mind, waiting for her to lower her guard? She checked her mental barriers, solid, intact. Nothing lurking in her psyche, except her own thoughts. Then where was the disturbance coming from? She scanned the laboratory. The runes on the walls were dim, their energy depleted from yesterday's battle. The meditation platforms showed no unusual activity, but there on the floor near Bane's platform, something glinted. Anders' holocron. It must have fallen from Bane's robes during the struggle. Zannah picked it up carefully. The moment her fingers touched the pyramid, it activated. But instead of Anders' gatekeeper, a different hologram appeared. Bane. Not the corpse lying on the platform. This was Bane, as he'd been years ago. Healthier, stronger. His voice filled the chamber. If you're seeing this, apprentice, then I am dead, and you have proven yourself worthy. Zannah stared at the recording. But Bane had prepared for this, had anticipated his own failure. Do not mistake my attempt at essence transfer for weakness. The recording continued. I needed to test you, to ensure that if my body failed before you were ready to face me properly, you would still prove capable of resisting the ultimate violation. The hologram smiled, and you did. You protected your consciousness, destroyed my invading essence, exactly as the rule of 2 demands. It was a test. Zannah's hands trembled slightly. All of it was a test. I could have chosen a different body. Bane's recording said, could have transferred into a stranger and continued my work independently, but that would have violated everything the Sith should be. The apprentice must surpass the master or the species stagnates, so I chose you. Forced you into a battle that would either prove your worthiness or reveal your weakness. The hologram flickered. The rule of 2 is absolute. I am glad you upheld it. Now, as the new Dark Lord, you must take an apprentice of your own, train them as I trained you, and when they're ready, face them as I faced you. This is our way. This is how the Sith survive. The recording began to fade. One final thing. You'll find my research notes in the terminal beside you. Everything I learned about essence transfer, about Sith sorcery, about political manipulation. Study it, use it, But remember that knowledge is worthless without the strength to apply it properly. You have that strength now. Don't waste it. The hologram vanished. The holocron went dark. Zannah stood alone in the laboratory, holding the holocron, staring at Bane's corpse. Had he really planned his own death, turned his failure into a final lesson? Or was this recording simply a contingency, a way to maintain control even from beyond the grave? It didn't matter. Bane was gone. She'd won. The method didn't change the outcome. She spent the next hours going through Bane's research. The terminal contained decades of accumulated knowledge, techniques she'd never been taught, contacts she didn't know existed, financial accounts, safe houses, passwords, everything Bane had built now transferred to her. She copied it all to a portable drive. Then she gathered Bane's body and carried it outside. The Titan sun hung low in the sky, painting everything orange and gold. She built a pyre from fallen branches, placed Bane's corpse atop it, and ignited the structure with force lightning. As the flames consumed her former master, Zannah spoke the traditional Sith funerary rite. "Through victory my chains are broken. The Force shall free me." The words felt hollow, ceremonial, but traditions mattered. They connected her to thousands of years of Sith history, to every Dark Lord who'd come before. She was part of that chain now, a link between past and future. The fire burned through the night. By morning nothing remained but ash. Zannah scattered the ashes across Titan's forests. Bane would become part of the soil, part of the world he'd chosen for his final stand. There was poetry in that. She returned to the compound and began making preparations to leave. Titan had served its purpose. Now she needed to return to the wider galaxy to continue the work, to find an apprentice. But first, she needed to deal with a loose end. She activated her communicator and sent a coded message to a contact on Coruscant. The reply came within hours. Set Hearth was still alive, still operating in the shadows, still available for the right price. Zannah composed a message. She needed to see him, face to face. There was something they needed to discuss. The meeting took place in the Coruscant underworld, in the same abandoned industrial sector where they'd parted ways years earlier. Set arrived looking cautious, hand near his concealed lightsaber. "You called," he said. "I'm here. What do you need?" Zannah studied him. He'd aged slightly, grown more confident in his movements. But the fundamental cowardice remained. She could see it in how he positioned himself near multiple exits, always ready to run. "My master is dead," she said, directly. Set's eyes widened. "Bean, you killed him." "I defeated him. There's a difference." Not much of one for him. Set relaxed slightly. "So what now? You're the new Dark Lord, looking for recruits?" "No, looking to tie up loose ends." Zannah moved closer. "You're a talented Force user operating independently. That makes you a potential problem." Set's hand moved to his weapon. "So this is an elimination. I should have known." "Not necessarily." Zannah stopped just outside striking distance. "I'm offering you a choice. Swear loyalty to me. Serve as an agent when I need one. Continue your independent work otherwise, but remain available when called. In exchange, you live and prosper under my protection." "And if I refuse?" "Then yes, this becomes an elimination. I can't have unknown Force users operating in areas where I work. Too much risk of interference." Set considered. His fingers drummed against his lightsaber hilt. "What kind of work would you need from me?" "Intelligence gathering. Retrieval operations, occasionally eliminating targets I can't reach personally. Nothing you haven't done before. The difference is you'd have backup, resources, protection from Jedi scrutiny. And I'd be expendable if things went wrong." Zannah didn't deny it. Yes, but you're already expendable. At least this way you're expendable with support. Seth laughed. It was genuine, not forced. You're honest. I'll give you that. He released his weapon. Fine. I'll swear to you. Not out of loyalty. Understand? Out of practical self-interest. I wouldn't expect anything else from you. They formalized the arrangement. Seth would remain independent publicly, but would answer when Zannah called. He would report any Jedi activity or other Force users he encountered. In exchange, she would provide resources and ensure his operations didn't conflict with hers. It wasn't the traditional Sith apprenticeship. Seth lacked the commitment for that. But he could serve other purposes, a tool to be used when needed. Nothing more. One more thing, Zannah said as they prepared to part. If you ever betray me, you won't die quickly. I'll make sure of that. Understood. Seth gave a mock salute. Pleasure doing business with you, Dark Lord. He disappeared into the shadows. Zannah watched him go, already calculating how to use him effectively. He would never be Sith, would never embrace the philosophy fully, but pawns had their uses. She returned to her safe house and began planning her next moves. The grand plan needed continuation. Bane's network needed maintenance, and most importantly, she needed a real apprentice. Someone she could train properly, someone who might eventually surpass her, just as she'd surpassed Bane. The search would take time. Finding Force-sensitive children who showed dark side potential wasn't simple. The Jedi found most of them first, but Zannah was patient. She'd learned that lesson well. Weeks passed, then months. Zannah moved between worlds, following leads, investigating rumors. She maintained Bane's shell corporations, met with his political contacts, slowly integrated herself into the networks he'd built. Most of the contacts never knew Bane had died. They simply dealt with a new representative. Credits still flowed. Information still moved. The machine continued functioning regardless of who operated it. On Onderon, she encountered someone interesting. A blind woman, old, withered, but powerful in the Force. The woman sat in the marketplace, seemingly begging, but Zannah felt the dark side radiating from her like heat. She approached carefully, the woman's head tilted, tracking Zannah's movement despite her blindness. "You're strong," the woman said, trained, disciplined, but carrying a burden. Zannah crouched beside her. What burden? The burden of succession. You killed your master. Now you search for a student. The cycle continues. "Who are you?" The woman smiled. Her teeth were rotted, her eyes milky white. "I am Cognos, seer, oracle, and if you're wise, your next apprentice." Zannah studied her. Cognos was decades older than Bane had been, ancient, dying, but her presence in the Force was undeniable, and her blindness meant she developed other senses, precognition perhaps, useful skills for a Sith. "Why would you want to be my apprentice? You're old, dying. The training would kill you." "Perhaps, or perhaps I'll live long enough to pass what I know to you, and then to my successor." Cognos's smile widened. "I've had visions, seen the future. The Sith will rise again, rule the galaxy. But not in my lifetime, not in yours. Generations from now, I want to be part of that chain." Zannah made her decision. Rise. Cognos stood with surprising agility. She was taller than Zannah expected. Thin, but not frail. "You'll train on Tython," Zannah said. "Can you travel?" "I've traveled further than you can imagine, child. Lead, I'll follow." They left Onderon together, master and apprentice, the rule of two continuing. Zannah felt a sense of completion. The cycle Bane had started with her on Ruusan now perpetuated forward. She was no longer just the apprentice. She was the master, the teacher, the guardian of Sith philosophy for the next generation. On the journey to Tython, Cognos spoke of her visions, of a galaxy burning, of Jedi temples falling, of a Dark Lord who would finally claim ultimate victory centuries in the future. "These things will come to pass," Cognos said. "I've seen them in dreams and waking visions alike. The Sith will have their revenge." "If the grand plan succeeds," Zannah replied, "if every generation does its part, they will. The Force itself demands balance. The Jedi have grown complacent, arrogant. They believe they've won. That belief will be their undoing." Zannah hoped the old woman was right, hoped that everything she and Bane had built would eventually culminate in victory. But she also knew better than to trust prophecies completely. The future was fluid, changeable. All they could do was lay the groundwork and trust their successors to capitalize on it. They reached Tython and began the work. Training, study, the transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next. Cognos proved a strange apprentice. She already knew much about the dark side. Her training focused more on Sith philosophy and long-term strategy than basic Force techniques. Years passed. Zannah aged into her 30s. Cognos grew frailer, but her mind remained sharp. They worked together, maintaining Bane's networks, advancing the grand plan in microscopic increments. And Zannah never forgot the lesson Bane had taught her. The apprentice must surpass the master. When Cognos was ready, when she'd absorbed everything Zannah could teach, there would be another confrontation, another test. The rule of two was absolute. It demanded blood, demanded death, demanded evolution. Zannah accepted that, embraced it. When her time came, when her apprentice stood before her with ignited lightsaber, she would face it with the same courage Bane had shown. Because that was what it meant to be Sith. To understand that death wasn't an ending, but a transformation. That power passed through violence from one generation to the next, each iteration stronger than the last. She stood on Tython's balcony one evening, watching the sun set over ancient forests. Cognos meditated inside. The compound was quiet, peaceful. But Zannah knew that peace was temporary, illusory. Eventually there would be conflict, challenge, the inevitable confrontation between master and apprentice. She looked forward to it. Not because she wanted to die, but because she wanted to test herself one final time, to see if she truly was worthy of the title, Dark Lord, to discover if her successor would surpass her just as she'd surpassed Bane. The cycle would continue, the chain would extend. Generation after generation, century after century. Until finally, one distant day, a Sith Lord would stand atop the ruins of the Jedi Temple and declare victory. Zannah wouldn't live to see it. Neither would Cognos, neither would the next dozen Dark Lords in the chain. But they would all contribute, all add their link to the chain that would eventually encircle the galaxy. That was enough. That was everything. The sun dipped below the horizon. Darkness spread across Tython, and in that darkness, Darth Zannah smiled. The Sith endured. The Sith evolved. The Sith would triumph. It was only a matter of time. Zannah stood over Bane's body for a long time after the pyre had burned to ash. The Tython wind scattered the remains across the forest floor, mixing them with soil and fallen leaves. Her master was gone, truly gone, his consciousness destroyed in the attempt to claim her body, his physical form reduced to dust. She felt no grief. Grief was for the weak, but she felt something else, a weight, the understanding that she now carried everything forward alone, the grand plan, the networks, the accumulated knowledge of generations, all of it rested on her shoulders now. She returned to the compound and spent 3 days organizing Bane's research. His files contained details she'd never suspected. Contacts on 17 different worlds, shell corporations controlling significant portions of key industries, blackmail material on senators and corporate executives, seeds planted so carefully that they'd remain dormant for decades before bearing fruit. The scope was staggering. Bane had been building an invisible empire, one that would eventually undermine the Republic so thoroughly that its collapse would seem inevitable rather than orchestrated. And now, it belonged to her, her responsibility to maintain, her duty to expand. But first, she needed an apprentice. The rule of two was absolute. One master, one apprentice. The chain could not be broken. Without succession, everything Bane had built would die with her. She left Tython and traveled to Onderon. The moon Dixon was nearby, an ancient Sith stronghold where the dark side pooled thick in the jungles. If any Force sensitives existed outside Jedi reach, they might be drawn there. The capital city of Aziz sprawled across Onderon's landscape, all stone towers and ancient walls. The people here had their own complicated history with the Force. Beast riders who'd once been ruled by Sith spirits. A culture that understood darkness wasn't always evil, and light wasn't always good. Zannah moved through the marketplace, sensing, searching, and there, sitting against a wall in the shadow of a merchant stall, she found what she was looking for. An old woman, blind. Her eyes were milky white, seeing nothing. But in the Force, she blazed like a beacon. Zannah approached slowly. The woman's head turned, tracking her movement despite the blindness. "You're looking for someone," the woman said. Her voice was rough, weathered by decades, looking for a successor. Zannah crouched beside her. "Who are you?" "My name is Cognos. I am a seer. The Force shows me things others cannot perceive. Past, present, future, all flowing together like water." The woman smiled, revealing gaps in her teeth. "I saw you coming, saw you standing over burning ashes, saw the choice you would make." "What choice?" "To take me as your apprentice, despite my age, despite my weakness, because you recognize that some knowledge transcends physical strength." Zannah studied her carefully. Cognos was ancient. Her body was failing. She had perhaps a decade left at most. Training her would be difficult. She'd never achieve the physical prowess required for traditional Sith combat. But her presence in the Force was undeniable, and if she truly possessed foresight, that ability alone could prove invaluable. "Why do you want to be Sith?" Zannah asked. "You're old, dying. What do you hope to gain?" "Purpose." Cognos turned her blind eyes toward Zannah. "I've spent 70 years seeing fragments of futures I could not influence, watching events unfold exactly as my visions predicted, unable to change anything. Now, at the end of my life, I want to be part of something that matters, something that will echo through centuries. The Sith Grand Plan. Yes, I've seen it, seen the temple burning, seen the Republic falling, seen a darkness that swallows the galaxy whole." The woman's expression was fierce. "I want to contribute to that. Want my visions to serve a purpose beyond simply predicting doom." Zannah made her decision. "Stand." Cognos rose with surprising grace. She was taller than Zannah had expected, thin but not frail. The dark side sustained her, kept her alive beyond natural limits. "You'll train on Tython," Zannah said. "The journey is difficult. Can you travel?" "I've traveled further than you imagine, child. I fled the Jedi once, wandered the Outer Rim for decades. I can manage one more journey." They left Onderon together. The ship carried them through hyperspace, while Zannah explained the basics. The rule of two, the philosophy of power through succession, the long-term nature of the Grand Plan. Cognos absorbed everything with startling speed. Her mind was sharp, despite her age. She asked questions that demonstrated deep understanding of Sith principles, questions Bane himself might have asked. When they reached Tython, Zannah began the training properly. Cognus's physical limitations meant lightsaber combat would never be her strength. Instead, they focused on her natural talents, foresight, precognition, the ability to sense danger before it manifested. And Sith sorcery, Cognus took to it immediately. Her blindness had forced her to perceive the world through the Force for so long that manipulating perception came naturally. Within months, she could create illusions that rivaled Zannah's own. The training sessions took on a rhythm, mornings in meditation deepening their connection to the dark side, afternoons in study reviewing ancient texts and Bane's strategic documents, evenings in practice honing techniques and testing each other's limits. Cognus proved more than just a student. Her visions provided strategic insights that Zannah had never considered. She could sense which of Bane's networks would flourish and which would fail, which political investments would pay off and which would collapse. Her foresight became an invaluable tool for managing the grand plan. Years passed. Zannah aged into her 30s. Cognus grew frailer, but her mind remained razor-sharp. They worked together, two Sith operating in perfect shadow, invisible to the Jedi who believed the darkness extinct. They traveled occasionally to Coruscant, maintaining the networks, to other worlds where opportunities arose, always careful, always hidden, planting seeds that would germinate decades hence. On one such trip to Coruscant, Zannah encountered Set Hearth again. He'd survived, built a modest career as a freelance operative. When he saw her, recognition and fear flickered across his face. "Zannah," he said carefully, "or should I say Dark Lord?" "Just Zannah." She studied him. "You're still alive. I'm surprised. I'm very good at surviving. It's my primary talent." The Set maintained his distance. "What do you want?" "Nothing. I'm simply observing that you've managed to avoid Jedi attention all these years. That takes skill. Or cowardice. I pick jobs carefully, never draw too much scrutiny, never involve myself in anything too dangerous." He smiled without humor. "I learned from watching you and Bane. Power attracts enemies. I prefer to stay beneath notice. A wise strategy for someone of your abilities." They parted without conflict. Set Hearth would remain a ghost, never rising to significance, never threatening the Sith plans. Some Force users simply weren't destined for greatness. They survived by staying small. Back on Tython, Zannah and Cognus continued their work. The relationship between them grew complex. Not quite friendship. Sith didn't do friendship. But something deeper than simple master and apprentice. A partnership built on mutual respect and shared vision. Cognus's visions grew more frequent as she aged. She would sit for hours, blind eyes staring at nothing, watching futures unfold. Sometimes she would emerge from these trances with strategic insights, other times with warnings about threats decades away. One evening, she described a vision that chilled even Zannah's blood. "I saw the Jedi children," Cognus said quietly. "Hundreds of them, all dying in their temple while their masters were scattered across the galaxy. Cut down by soldiers they trusted, by an army that turned traitor in a single moment. When, centuries from now, maybe 1,000 years, but it will happen. The Force has shown me. The man who orders it stands in a Senate chamber and declares himself emperor, and the galaxy kneels." "Sidious," Zannah said. The vision had come to her as well, though less clearly, a Sith Lord who would finally complete what they started. "I don't know his name, but I know he succeeds. Everything we do now leads to his victory. Every seed planted, every network maintained, every apprentice trained." Cognus turned her blind eyes toward Zannah. "We won't live to see it. Neither will our successors for many generations, but it will happen." Then we continue the work. Yes, we continue. More years accumulated. Zannah passed 40. Cognos passed 80. They were an unlikely pair. Young Dark Lord and ancient apprentice, but they functioned perfectly together. Zannah's strength and Cognos's foresight combined into something greater than either alone. They maintained Bane's networks, expanded them carefully, built new connections while preserving old ones. The work was slow, patient, invisible, exactly as it should be. The Jedi remained blind. They erected monuments to their victory at Ruusan, celebrated the end of the Sith threat, trained their younglings in a temple built on the ruins of an ancient dark side nexus, never questioning whether that might be strategically significant. Their arrogance would be their undoing, not today, not for centuries, but eventually. Zannah stood on Tython's balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. Cognos joined her, moving with the careful steps of someone whose body was finally giving out. "I won't live much longer," Cognos said, without preamble. "A year, maybe 2. The visions are clear on this." Zannah had known this was coming. Cognos was over 80 now. The dark side could only sustain flesh for so long. "Then what? You've never challenged me. Never tried to prove yourself worthy of succession." "Because I'm not worthy. Not in the traditional sense." Cognos smiled. "I lack the strength for it. We both know this. But I've served my purpose, provided the visions you needed, helped refine the grand plan. And I'll do one more thing before I die." "What?" "Help you find the next apprentice. Someone younger, stronger, capable of eventually surpassing you, as you surpassed Bane." Cognos touched Zannah's arm gently. "The rule of 2 must continue. That's more important than my pride or your comfort. We find the next link in the chain together." Zannah felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Cognos understood the larger picture in a way few Sith ever had. Personal glory mattered less than the mission. Individual survival mattered less than species continuation. "Where do we look?" Zannah asked. "The Force will guide us. My visions have already shown glimpses. A child on Drummond Cassus, strong in the dark side, angry, perfect raw material. We'll find them together. Train them together for a time. Then when I'm gone, you'll complete their education alone. And they'll eventually kill me." As it should be, Cognos turned her blind eyes toward the sunset she couldn't see. That's the beauty of the rule of 2. None of us matter as individuals. We're links in a chain. Our purpose is to be strong enough to hold our position and wise enough to forge the next link, nothing more. They began the search the following week, traveled together through the Outer Rim, following Cognos's visions, seeking the next apprentice. It took months, but eventually they found what they were looking for. The child was perfect, young, powerful, filled with the rage and ambition necessary for Sith training. Zannah took them and returned to Tython, beginning the education that would eventually lead to her own death. But that death lay years away. For now, there was work, training, the continuation of everything Bane had started, everything Zannah had inherited, everything that would pass to the next generation and the next, and the next. She stood in the training chamber, watching her new apprentice practice lightsaber forms. Cognos sat nearby, blind but seeing more than most with full vision ever would. The old woman's time was ending. Zannah's own time would end eventually as well. But the Sith would endure. The rule of 2 would continue. The grand plan would advance. 2 there were, master and apprentice. Each generation stronger than the last. Each link in the chain perfectly forged, patient, inevitable, eternal. The Jedi celebrated in their temple, believing they'd won. They hadn't even realized the real war had begun. Zannah smiled. Her legacy was secure. Bane's vision preserved the darkness would rise again. Not in her lifetime, but someday, certainly, inevitably. She returned her attention to the training, watching her apprentice grow, knowing that one day those same hands would end her life, and finding peace in that knowledge. Because that was what it meant to be Sith. To understand that death was not failure but transformation, that power passed through blood from one generation to the next. That individual lives mattered less than eternal purpose. The rule of two, perfect, unchanging, absolute. And through that rule, the Sith would claim their revenge, would watch the Jedi fall, would see the Republic crumble, would witness the rise of an empire that would span the galaxy. Just not today. Today was for training, for patience, for laying groundwork that others would build upon. Zannah watched the sun set over Tython's forests where Bane's ashes rested. Tomorrow she would continue the work, would teach, would plan, would ensure that when her time came, nothing would be lost. The darkness endured through her, through those who would come after, through every Sith Lord who would carry the torch forward across centuries. From Ruusan to the Empire's rise, an unbroken line of succession, sacrifice and evolution. This was her purpose, her legacy, her gift to the future. And it was enough.